Chapter 2348. Mr. Juin. Enlin's heart jolted at the sight of Patriarch Juin. "Why are you back?" "I'm here to help you." A determined expression appeared on Patriarch Juin's face. "My injuries have completely healed, so you don't have to worry." Enlin took a closer look, and sure enough, he could sense that the other party's injuries had mostly healed. He couldn't help but be astonished. After sensing the vigorous medicinal power erupting from the other party's body, he came to a sudden realization. So this was also a player with money. Several seconds later, Patriarch Juin transformed into his true form over 1,000,000 feet tall before pouncing toward the several dozen primordial beasts. "Enlin, go and help Tina," Patriarch Juin instructed in a domineering voice. Enlin was very happy that Patriarch Juin was able to return to the battlefield, and he nodded in response. "All right, hang in there. As long as the Tao of the Life Goddess unleashes her true form of time, we'll be able to win this battle." He flew toward Tina with his evil slaying sword in hand. Tina used her ultra-powerful swordsmanship to defend herself against the Life Goddess Jade Hairpin, and the space within a radius of tens of thousands of kilometers was shattered before it even had a chance to heal. Tina's divine mirror world sword was super powerful and had already transcended beyond the realm of divine tools. It was a heavenly Tao-level weapon, and her swordsmanship was at the pinnacle of the Taichu continent. Even so, she was still struggling to breathe under the Life Goddess' relentless attacks. A series of gashes and holes appeared on her petite body, and even though they weren't lethal wounds, they were still extremely painful to deal with. At this moment, a black sword projection flashed through the air and sliced through the jade hairpin. Enlin had rejoined the battle against the Life Goddess. "Giant Enlin." An elated smile appeared on Tina's face. She had nothing to fear now that she could fight alongside Enlin. The two of them unleashed another frenzied barrage of attacks toward the Life Goddess, and the tables were turned once again. At this moment, at the central region of the White Nectar Sea, countless earth-shattering collisions erupted, as if the sun were flashing incessantly. All of a sudden, boundless spear projections tore through the night sky, turning the starry night sky into a vast expanse of silver. The sky crocodile's blood-curdling screeches reverberated through the heavens and the earth as its massive body fell into the sea. After its strength skyrocketed, its skin, which had become especially hard, was pierced by the silver spear, leaving bloody holes. Blackstone gripped the silver-white spear with both hands. His pitch-black wings stretched out for hundreds of thousands of meters, covering the entire sky. The extremely sharp silver-white spear light became the only color in the world, like a peerless heavenly sword in the eternal night. Ultimate creation spear of truth. Godslayer. Blackstone gripped his spear with both hands and thrust it towards the sky crocodile. The extreme spear radiance brought with it the power to split the heavens and earth as it fell from the sky. The silvery white origin force illuminated the sky and the sea into a silvery white ocean. There was a spear, the only truth, that pierced through the heavens and the earth, piercing through the boundaries, directly breaking through the absolute sky defense of the sky crocodile, and directly piercing through the head of the sky crocodile. The sky crocodile's body shuddered, and a deeper level of its essence was also destroyed by the silver spear projection at this moment. The silver spear light dissipated. The broken body fell into the sea and was swallowed by the bottomless whirlpool. Phew! Blackstone heaved a sigh of relief as cold sweat dripped down her pale face. She retracted her wings, but her spear-wielding arm was still trembling slightly. It was clear that she had overexerted herself in that last attack. "I won." Her eyes were bright, and a smile appeared on her face. Even though her face was a little pale, her smile was still breathtakingly beautiful. She had relied on her absolute power to slay the sky crocodile. This was not an easy feat. She had completed the mission given to her by the heaven-crushing goddess. This was what made her the happiest. At this moment, the heaven-crushing united army, spectating from afar, were all extremely excited. It was another hearty victory. Every victory was worthy of their happiness. The Darkwing Emperor's eyes lit up as a strange emotion welled up in his heart. This was the attitude that a top-tier powerful being in the Darkwing tribe should have. He didn't know what the Blackstone goddess thought of him, or whether she would be interested in him. Gradually, a burst of fighting spirit welled up in the Darkwing Emperor's heart. He felt like the reason why he had been single for tens of thousands of years was finally here. At this moment, the black-robed woman put away her spear and swallowed 2 immortal pills. It's a pity that I've overexerted myself and can't continue to fight. Blackstone was a little concerned as he looked at his other 2 companions, who were embroiled in a bitter battle. Mou and Tion were still embroiled in a bitter battle. The 3 living beings and Blackstone were in an extremely feeble state after taking care of their enemies, so they couldn't do anything. Perhaps the only one who could help was Flowing Gold. However, he was also severely disabled, so his combat prowess was about the same as that of a god of creation in the infinite realm of stars. Perhaps he was even a little weaker. At this level of power, he would most likely only cause more trouble. Flowing Gold felt like he shouldn't embarrass himself like this. At this moment, the Sword Maiden and Lin were engaged in a mixed attack against a round rock. The Sword Maiden viciously struck the rock, sending it flying. Then, Lin's heavenly threads sliced through the rock like a net, sending it flying again. After the rock was sent flying, the Sword Maiden wielded her heavenly sword and struck the rock in front of her again, sending it flying again. Thus, it was struck back and forth by the Sword Maiden and Lin, but it couldn't find a chance to retaliate, of course. It wasn't completely useless in this battle. At the very least, the 2 beauties were sweating profusely and exhausted from their attacks. Damn it, why is this thing so hard? The Sword Maiden gritted her teeth. Lin also had a headache as she looked at the cracks on the surface of the rock. They could injure Mou and inflict large and small cuts on its body, but they were unable to slice the rock in half, nor were they able to destroy Mou's god of creation essence. This was because this rock was a large world. Unless they could slice a large world in half, they wouldn't be able to inflict lethal damage on Mou. Only at this moment did the 2 heavenly beings realize just how troublesome Mou was. If this continued, they would either be smashed to death by Mou or die from exhaustion. Lin, what should we do? We can't continue like this. The Sword Maiden began to panic as she watched the 10 ancient beings fall one after another. Lin's clear eyes swept across the battlefield before finally locking on a Hey sure. This one is too hard to kill, so let's change targets. Lin spoke calmly. The Sword Maiden's eyes also lit up. That's right. Why do they have to chase after a bunch of flesh instead of killing them? After the Sword Lady slashed Mou away again, she immediately rode her sword through the void like a stream of light, piercing the black stone in the distance. Lin used the Heaven's Thread to pierce through space and stepped on the white thread. Her body drew an exaggerated arc on top of the white thread before shooting forward like an arrow. To everyone's surprise, the 2 primordial celestial beings suddenly pounced toward Heisher, who was already extremely feeble. Chapter 2349. Look out, Blackstone! Flowing Gold yelled in a panicked voice upon seeing the 2 heavenly beings unleash attacks. He immediately tried to chase after the heavenly beings, but he was far too slow. Even Mou was unable to catch up to the 2 primordial heavenly beings. A crimson light erupted from the Sword Maiden's celestial sword. The heavenly threads in Lin's hand tore through space as if they were slicing through tofu before sweeping toward Blackstone from all directions. This attack was enough to seal off all of Blackstone's paths of retreat. Blackstone could sense extreme peril and the threat of death looming over her, but she did not retreat or run. Instead, she quickly pulled out her silver spear and adopted a battle stance. Running away was useless. The only way out was to fight. Heaven and earth, projection heavenly net. Lin abruptly tugged at the air, and countless sharp white threads appeared from thin air, forming a massive spherical net that trapped Blackstone at the center before quickly converging with extreme sharpness. These were threads that could even shred the bodies of God of creation stage beings. Countless phenomena appeared on the threads, all of which were imbued with the power of the Tao realm and could nullify all types of attacks, thereby maximizing the power of the heavenly threads. Blackstone flew toward a certain direction without any hesitation before thrusting her spear forward like a dragon. However, the spear was unable to pierce through the extremely resilient heavenly threads, and it only managed to emit a sharp screeching sound. You can't even break through with a single point? Blackstone faltered slightly. She knew that she could definitely do this if she was at her peak, but she was too weak now. At this moment, the heavenly threads had already converged. There was no need for the Sword Maiden to do anything. Lynn alone was enough to cut her death. Blackstone was filled with indignation. All of a sudden, water vapor began to condense around her. At the same time, the amount of water rapidly increased. Just as she was trying to figure out what this was, the water suddenly exploded. A graceful mermaid with snowy white skin suddenly appeared beside her. Her divine halo released an extremely dazzling divine light, and there was a blue divine symbol on her forehead as she activated the power within her body to the extreme. It's actually a medium jump. Just who are you? Blackstone took a deep breath and looked at the beautiful stranger in front of him. At this time, a pale golden ball of water had already appeared in the mermaid's palm. It expanded wildly and touched Blackstone's body like a cool breeze. However, when it collided with the heavenly silk, it was like an extremely strong iron wall. It actually blocked the heavenly silk's attack in its place. My heaven thread was actually blocked by the water. Lynn was shocked. The heavenly threads contained the absolute will and laws of the heavenly Tao that could cut through all things. However, the faint golden ball of water before him actually contained the power of the heavenly Tao as well. Moreover, it was the power of the heavenly Tao that was extremely powerful. Water could transform all things into yin and yang. The celestial thread's attack was blocked. Not only that, but the celestial threads began to bend and deform under the pressure of the expanding ball of water, emitting cracking sounds. The mermaid who had suddenly appeared to save the day was none other than the leader of the West Sea Alliance, Lan Xiaoni. Furthermore, this was Lan Xiaoni who had activated her ultimate water mystic technique. One had to know that she hadn't even used the ultimate water secret technique when she was fighting against the three heavenly gods. But now she was using it. It was all for this moment. She was going to unleash her potential in a battle of the highest caliber. Break it again, Lan Xiaoni instructed Blackstone. Blackstone stabbed his spear forward without any hesitation. After combining the power of the golden ball of water, the heavenly threads were finally unable to withstand this attack, and they were instantly shattered. Blackstone and Lan Xiaoni broke out of the cage at the same time. However, they had only just emerged when an earth-shattering sword strike awaited them. The Sword Maiden's attack suddenly appeared. A crimson sword projection pierced through the air with the extremely concentrated power of the heavenly Tao realm, as well as the Tao of death as it slashed down upon the two women. This sword strike was even more terrifying than the heavenly thread cage from before. After all, the heavenly threads from before focused on trapping and slicing, but this sword strike only had one word to describe it: kill. The killing intent was extremely potent. The sharpness of the blade was unmatched. The hair on Blackstone's body stood on end. Even in her peak condition, she would find it extremely difficult to face this sword strike, let alone in her current state. However, Lan Xiaoni seemed to have anticipated this, and she waved a hand through the air, upon which a golden wave surged forth in a frenzy toward the terrifying sword projection. The sword projection instantly tore through the golden wave. Just as Blackstone was feeling a sense of foreboding, the more the sword projection advanced through the golden wave, the weaker its sword might became. The paramount sword might was constantly being whittled away by the golden wave. Water could wash away everything, but it could also dissolve everything. Lan Xiaoni had unleashed the power of water to the fullest. When the Sword Maiden's terrifying sword projection reached Lan Xiaoni, Lan Xiaoni had already materialized a deep blue water sword, which shattered the Sword Maiden's sword projection with a single sword strike. Both sides fell silent. Blackstone was completely dumbstruck. Never would she have thought that she would be protected by a Dao integration stage woman, and she was also ridiculously powerful. The Sword Maiden was in complete disbelief. Was this the power of a normal heavenly god? She would have thought that she was facing a paramount heavenly god if she didn't say anything. Sword Maiden, she won't be able to last much longer in this state. Let's attack her together, and she won't be able to hold on for much longer. Lin charged toward Blackstone and Lan Xiaoni again. The Sword Maiden came to her senses. That's right, she had been frightened by Lan Xiaoni's display of power, but she didn't know that Lan Xiaoni was definitely using some kind of mystic technique that required an extremely heavy price. With this in mind, the Sword Maiden's confidence swelled explosively again. However, at this moment, snow suddenly began to fall from the sky. The Sword Maiden shuddered involuntarily as she sensed a bone-chilling sensation, and she looked up into the sky. A blue vortex had appeared in the center of the sky. Snow fell from the sky, and a frosty aura froze the entire sky. There was a white-robed woman, cold and aloof. She stepped lightly in the air, and with every step she took, lotuses bloomed as she walked towards the direction of the Sword Lady. Lan Xiaoni's divine seal appeared, and she raised a hand to summon pure blue seawater. Big Sister Shangguan, I'll lend you 100,000 feet of heavenly water. A faint smile appeared on the white-robed woman's face, and 100,000 feet of seawater, which was imbued with the power of the heavenly god of water, quickly froze before blossoming like a lotus flower. In the end, a deep blue ice sword appeared from the center of the lotus flower, and it fell toward the Sword Maiden as if it were a free fall. There was no aura or sword might, only pure water and pure ice. The blue of water, the chill of ice. The Sword Maiden gripped her sword in an attempt to defend herself, only to find that she was completely immobilized. Her body had already been covered in frost, and her body had been corroded by the peculiar power of frost. No! A look of horror appeared on the Sword Maiden's face. The blue frosty sword fell. Constant dripping water could pierce through a rock. It punctured her head. Countless shards of ice flew through the air. Chapter 2350. The Sword Maiden felt like the world was extremely cold, and all she could see was an icy blue. Finally, her vision began to blur in the extreme cold, and her consciousness fell into darkness. Even Lin's panicked cries began to fade away. The Sword Maiden's body became an ice sculpture before exploding into countless glittering shards of ice that completely disappeared into the air. Sword Maiden! Lin yelled, but she received no response. Dead? She died just like that? Lin fell into a state of uncontrollable fear when she saw this. She could sense that the Sword Lady's origin had also been frozen by that slash, and then destroyed. The awe-inspiring swordswoman suddenly perished after the white-robed woman appeared. Everything had happened so suddenly that Lin didn't know what to do to salvage the situation. Or rather, she hadn't decided what she should do to die. What was going on? Why did so many powerful beings suddenly appear? Lin expressed her despair. The white-robed woman in the sky was none other than Shangguan, who had just finished her conversation with the heavenly Dao. Shangguan didn't appear to have sustained any injuries, and her aura had become even more ethereal. It was quite clear that her conversation with the heavenly Dao had transformed her to some extent. The Ice Matriarch was already a veteran god of creation, and she didn't even dare to imagine just how powerful she was now. At the very least, Lin felt like she wouldn't be able to defeat her. Meanwhile, within the creation territory, one of the life goddess wings suddenly burst into flames again, and she was mocked by Lin again. Yo, goddess, your wings have become asymmetrical again. A three-winged celestial being, what a unique design. Won't you fly, ask you? And Lin chortled with glee. The life goddess took a deep breath, and her jade hairpin attacks became even more vicious and violent. Unfortunately, Lin and Tina's teamwork was flawless, and she was unable to inflict any lethal wounds on Lin. Not happy? I suggest you burn another wing, so it'll be symmetrical again. And Lin chuckled. In your dreams, the life goddess retorted. Her voice had only just fallen. With a puff, the other wing of the life goddess was also set on fire. Life goddess. The slap in the face came too fast, like a tornado. Even Lin was stunned into silence. His teammates were way too awesome. He couldn't help but cast his gaze toward the white nectar sea in the distance. And only after activating his Eye of Darkness did he discover Celestial Lin. The pitiful beauty was being bullied by Lan Xiaoni, He Shi, Shangwan, Mou, and Flowing Gold. No wonder she fell so quickly. The life goddess was filled with hatred. Why was it that every time they had the upper hand, they would lose? Did the enemy have the ability to turn the tables? Powerful enemies popped up one after another. What was going on? The fall of the 10 primordial ancients had dealt significant damage to the goddess of life's life essence. Not only that, but her speed had also decreased to a certain extent, making it even more strenuous for her to face the combined attacks of Lin and Tina. The life goddess couldn't help but look at the last 2 primordial ancients in the distance. The Sea King and the Sea Python still held the absolute upper hand as they unleashed a ferocious barrage of attacks upon Tian. However, for some reason, Tian was clearly on the back foot, and there were many wounds on her body that had disfigured her perfect features. But her expression was still extremely calm and collected as she took on the torrential barrage of attacks from the 2 primordial ancients in an orderly manner. It was as if these attacks weren't anything to be nervous about, and she would even look up into the sky from time to time with a glazed expression. The Sea King and the Sea Python both felt like they were being looked down upon, and their attacks became even more merciless, as if the entire white nectar sea were about to be churned up by their attacks. The Sea Python swept a tsunami over 100,000 feet in length toward Tian, but Tian swept her pink fishtail through the air to shatter the tsunami into countless white waves. At this moment, the Sea King had already stabbed his golden trident toward Tian. Tian Yi's fishtail whipped through the air as she evaded the attack with extreme agility. The golden trident fell beside her, and it was as if a bolt of golden light had fallen into the ocean, puncturing a few massive holes in the ocean. The Sea King's first attack had failed, so he raised his golden trident and stabbed it toward Tian again. Let's see how many times you can dodge. The golden trident rained down in a frenzy, sending shockwaves across tens of thousands of kilometers of the ocean. Tian was like a pink afterimage as she dodged one attack after another. She treated the ocean as her home, and she used the boundless power of the ocean to perfectly unleash her movement techniques. She evaded all of the Sea King's attacks without landing on the ground. Damn it, why is it so difficult to stab? The Sea King believed that there was no fish in the ocean that he couldn't stab, but this mermaid before him left him feeling extremely frustrated. He could determine what a living being was going to do next through their eyes, whether they were panicking, ruthless, or fearful. All of these expressions would betray what they were going to do next. The Sea King god was able to observe and then attack. This was an ability he was extremely good at. It was only when he met Tian, who had been ignorant from start to finish and had a look of indifference on her face, that he realized how painful it was to observe and observe. Tian only had one expression the entire time, so how could he observe her? As Tian dodged the trident, she didn't even look at the Sea King. Instead, she stared blankly at the sky as if she was in a daze. This infuriated the Sea King. From an outsider's point of view, it seemed like the Sea King and the Sea Python were suppressing Tian to the point where she couldn't even fight back. However, the Sea King knew that Tian, he just didn't want to fight them to the death. When the Sea King and the Sea Python were weak, they were happy with Tian. After all, Tian, he couldn't be bothered to fight them. But when they had great power, they despaired of Tian. They couldn't defeat Tian at all. They were confident that they could kill any other Genesis creator, but they couldn't do anything against Tian. The Sea King had already used all of his abilities. The Sea Python was about to engulf the entire white nectar sea, but Tian, he was like a swimming little fish, scurrying everywhere. The Sea King suddenly said, We can't delay any longer. The rest of the primordial ancients have all been killed. If we continue to fight here, we'll definitely be in trouble. The Sea King suddenly said, "Let's go to the goddess of life." The Sea Python completely agreed with the Sea King. At this moment, a beam of pure light shone down from the sky. The night sky became clear and bright. The white nectar sea glowed with a silvery luster. An old man arrived on a colorful cloud. His snow-white hair danced in the wind, and there was a benevolent smile on his face. He said in a clear voice, "Stop. What's so great about bullying a little girl? If you're so great, why don't you exchange a few blows with me?" Chapter 23:51. Who is this old man? We're bullying a little girl? The Sea King seemed to have heard something unbelievable, and he looked at the old man on the colorful cloud with surprise. "Don't worry about him. He's just trying to find an excuse to fight us. Let's go back to the life goddess." The sea serpent dived into the sea and fled into the distance without looking back after saying that. The Sea King didn't want to cause trouble, and he immediately flew toward the life goddess. "You bullied a little girl, and you want to run away?" The expression of the elderly man sitting on the colorful cloud became somewhat serious. The Sea King didn't know what was going on, but the old man suddenly appeared in front of him. "Damn it, is there no end to this? You want to fight me? Die." The Sea King's temper flared, and he stabbed his trident at the old man. The old man had a cheerful expression in the face of the earth-shattering stab. He merely extended a finger, and the great Tao of heaven and earth seemed to be touched at this moment, and an extremely pure vital light gathered at the tip of his finger. Tao begets one, boom. The golden trident collided with the finger. A terrifying shockwave exploded, and a spherical shockwave instantly expelled the laws of space, the sea, and the sky. The Sea King was struck by the recoil, and he almost lost his grip on the golden trident. "Who are you?" The Sea King was shocked. He knew the old man was powerful, but he didn't expect him to be this powerful. He could block his full force attack with a single finger. The old man smiled without saying anything and stood up from the colorful cloud. One becomes two. The black and white yin-yang diagram appeared beneath his feet and expanded infinitely, from nothingness to infinity, encompassing the vast white jade sea. Blackstone, flowing gold, and the other gods of creation all drew a sharp breath. They had lived for so long, but they had never seen such a pure black and white formation. It was as if it contained the truth of the universe, infinite mysteries and boundless power. The sea python had clearly fled to the bottom of the sea tens of thousands of kilometers away from the old man, but it was still suppressed by the black and white fish formation. No matter how much it struggled, it was completely useless. The Sea King was at the center of the formation, so he could feel how terrifying it was. The two forces had locked down his source tightly. The old man once again extended a finger towards the Sea King. Boundless Tao, power, and the Pisces' great array seemed to condense on the tip of his finger. He pointed it at the Sea King's head. 2, 3. The tip of his finger touched down, and countless black and white runes appeared on the Sea King's body out of thin air. After the runes were fused with the ultimate power of the way, the power was so terrifying that it reached the source. Third, all living things. The old man's voice reverberated throughout the world. At that moment, the Sea King and the Sea Python saw everything in the world. They saw the endless mysteries of the universe. Countless things flashed through their origin consciousness. It was like a flashing lantern of life, like the ultimate meaning of the world. No, what exactly is this feeling? The Sea King Supreme looked as if he had been enlightened. The runes on his body flickered, and he kept expanding. His skin started to crack. His body was clearly in excruciating pain, but the exhilarating feeling of attaining a certain level suppressed the Sea King Supreme's pain. The Sea King Supreme couldn't help but pursue that feeling in order to completely absorb the power that was imbued with the true meaning of the universe. The old man slowly withdrew his hand with a smile. "By the way, my name is Old Lord Taishang. People like to call me the Heavenly Lord of Tao and Virtue." His voice trailed off. Boom! An explosive boom erupted. The Sea King Supreme suddenly exploded. The sea python, which was tens of thousands of kilometers away, also exploded. The resulting energy explosion swept up a tsunami over 100,000 feet tall. The heavenly lord of Tao and virtue stepped lightly into the air, and the yin-yang Pisces great array over the white nectar sea trembled slightly. The tsunami over 100,000 feet tall immediately subsided. The sea returned to its calm state. He waved his hand, and heaven and earth changed colors. He stomped his foot, and everything became calm again. Such a divine ability was actually nothing to the heavenly lord of Tao and virtue. Everything was over. The Sea King Supreme and the sea python were part of the 10 primordial beasts, but they had been slain by the heavenly lord of Tao and virtue without even getting a chance to resist. This was even more impressive than when Patriarch Zhu Yin had made his entrance. The heaven-crushing united army had reached a climax. In particular, all of the powerful cultivators. The heavenly lord of Tao and virtue was an existence that they had always looked up to. After all, he was the ancestor of all immortals and the teacher of all sages. Most of the living beings had only heard of his legends, but they had never had the chance to see him in battle. However, on this day, they were finally able to witness the heavenly lord of Tao and virtue standing on the same side as them and fighting alongside them. Some of the cultivators were so excited that tears welled up in their eyes, but at the same time, they also attained enlightenment. The title of Tao Ancestor was not just for show. The heavenly lord of Tao and virtue's casual display of power was imbued with the power of enlightenment. To the spectators, this was definitely a treasure trove. It was very easy for them to attain enlightenment. At this moment, the heavenly lord of Tao and virtue turned toward Tian-Yi. Tian-Yi did not appear to be surprised or astonished. Instead, she bowed slightly toward the heavenly lord of Tao and virtue. Thank you. You're welcome. The heavenly lord of Tao and virtue stroked his beard and shook his head. I just can't bear to see someone bully a little girl like you. I'm not a little girl anymore. Tian-Yi's voice was soft and gentle. The heavenly lord of Tao and virtue found this god of creation quite interesting, and he was just about to say something along the lines of saying that no matter how old she was still a little girl in his eyes. Tian-Yi suddenly said, I'm little fishy. Ahem. The heavenly lord of Tao and virtue almost choked to death. Not a little girl, but a little fishy? What kind of strange self-perception was this? Little fishy will eventually have to return to her own fish pond. Only that small fish pond is where I belong. Tian-Yi looked up at the sky as she spoke in a gentle voice. The heavenly lord of Tao and virtue also looked up at the sky. Perhaps the Sea King didn't know what Tian-Yi was looking at and thought that Tian-Yi was in a daze, looking down on them. However, the heavenly lord of Tao and virtue saw that the sky was not the same sky. Instead, it was a sky that had transcended countless years of time. Ouch! My eyes hurt. The heavenly lord of Tao and virtue couldn't help but close his eyes and rub them in exasperation. He turned toward the beautiful mermaid who was still looking up at the sky and asked, Aren't your eyes tired from looking up at the sky all the time? Tian-Yi smiled, and it was a very beautiful smile. She was like a mermaid who had been watching the tides for thousands of miles. There is a strange sense of desolate beauty to her smile, and even someone as knowledgeable as the heavenly lord of Tao and virtue was taken aback by her smile. Tian-Yi swayed her long and translucent pink fishtail as she replied in a gentle voice, I'm not tired. It's my own home. No matter how I look at it, it doesn't make me tired. Chapter 2352. Unlin was swinging his evil-slaying sword in a frenzy toward the woman before him. The life goddess could control life and death, but she was unable to control Enlin's life and death. Instead, she was being forced into retreat by Enlin. Don't keep running, life. Your wings are about to fall off. Aren't you tired of running? Hurry up and fight me for 300 rounds. Enlin continued to talk the life goddess as he attacked. Normal paramount heavenly gods were able to control their emotions very well. However, the life goddess seemed to have a lot more life force, so her emotions were quite obvious. As such, Enlin's trash talk had a slight effect on her. For example, the life goddess really wanted to kill Enlin right now. All of a sudden, a massive yin-yang formation encompassed heaven and earth, encompassing the entire white nectar sea. The life goddess shuddered upon seeing this. Enlin was ecstatic. This is the heavenly lord of Tao and virtue. He was very familiar with this power. It could be said that he would never be able to forget it. So, when the power appeared, he knew who it was. Wasn't the heavenly lord of Tao and virtue on Yua's side? Why was he helping him now? Enlin was a little perplexed, but that didn't stop him from being ecstatic. The scales of victory were on his side. This was the irresistible trend. Sure enough, before he had a chance to sigh with emotion, the life goddess' final pair of wings suddenly burst into flames, revealing her astonished and indignant expression. Why? Why did another god of creation appear? The life goddess was extremely aggrieved, and she was so depressed that she couldn't even feel the pain from her burning wings. However, Enlin and Tina weren't going to pass up on this golden opportunity, and they immediately unleashed their full combat prowess to attack the dejected life goddess. Not long after that, a series of ghastly wounds began to appear on the life goddess body under the combined attacks of Enlin and Tina. "Life, we haven't lost yet," the heavenly heaven god yelled in a panicked voice that was imbued with the might of the heavens. However, the life goddess seemed to have completely lost her will to fight, and she could only defend herself like a machine. "Life, this was all Enlin's fault." "Enlin's fault? Don't you want revenge? Kill him," the heavenly sea god yelled. These words finally caused the life goddess' dim eyes to tremble slightly and then become a little brighter. "That's right. Even if my chances of winning have become smaller, I can still lose the battle, but Enlin must die." Enlin had never imagined that the Ocean Brotherhood would miss him so much that they would throw the blame to him right in front of his face, completely disregarding the Brotherhood they had in the past. The most important thing was the casting of the blame actually worked. The life goddess's bright orange-red eyes became a bit blood-red, and her aura completely changed. The deadly aura of death made Enlin feel a chill in his heart. "Forget it. I'll just consume more of my origin energy." The life goddess spoke in an indifferent voice as she withdrew the jade hairpin that was giving Enlin and Tina immense pressure. She then held the hairpin in her hand. Ka ka ka. A series of cracks began to appear on the jade hairpin, as if she had used too much force. Bam! There was a shattering sound. The jade hairpin was instantly shattered by the life goddess. Enlin and Tina both faltered slightly upon seeing this. What was she trying to do? Was she going to use a weapon to vent her anger? However, in the next instant, rich red energy began to flow from the jade hairpin. The life goddess divine halo gradually turned from green to dark red, and the power of death transformed into a red halo that instantly enshrouded the realm of creation. Her power had been activated by some kind of top-rate mystic technique, thereby elevating her to an even more terrifying level. However, before Enlin and Tina had a chance to panic, the heavenly sea god and the heavenly sea god were already panicking. "Stop, life goddess. I told you to pull yourself together, not to expend your origin energy in a frenzy." The heavenly heaven god roared in an urgent voice. "I told you to kill Enlin, not to kill him with your life." The heavenly sea god was also panicking, and he looked like he was about to burst into tears. "If you keep fighting like this, how are we supposed to maintain our final form and participate in the final battle? Even if we can kill Enlin, what happens after that? Our life essence will be gone. Our Tao will be gone. We'll have nothing left." The two paramount heavenly gods wanted to cheer the life goddess up, but never would they have thought that their words would have the opposite effect. Things were progressing in a direction that they didn't want to see the most. Of course, Enlin also didn't want to see something like this. The life goddess seemed to be trying to kill him by sacrificing herself to kill him. The woman in the flowery dress stood at the center of the halo of death. Behind her were mountains of corpses and seas of blood, and the butterfly of annihilation danced around her body. Crimson chains wound around her left arm, and she held a crimson spear in her right hand. In that instant, she was like the death goddess, and she stared intently at Enlin. Die! The life goddess gripped the air toward Enlin from afar. Thump! Enlin felt his heart thump in his chest. A peculiar paramount power of laws pierced through his 5-elemental body and reached his heart, as well as his life essence. His life force was then forcibly extracted by some kind of power, and it began to quickly fade away. This was the same life force extraction that the life goddess had used at the beginning of the battle. Tina reacted the fastest, and she swung her divine mirror world sword through the air, upon which a light barrier imbued with the might of the divine mirror, heavenly Tao, instantly enshrouded Enlin, thereby keeping the power of death at bay. Tina was already very familiar with this technique. Don't waste your energy. If you want to extract Giant Enlin's life force, you'll have to ask for my permission first. Tina spoke with a cold expression. The life goddess expression remained unchanged, but the butterfly of annihilation had already appeared around Tina, and inky black butterfly powder was falling from the sky. The butterfly powder created a unique domain that kept the little fairy's power at bay. Tina reacted extremely quickly, and she immediately unleashed her divine mirror world sword to attack the butterfly of annihilation. However, at this moment, the heavenly life goddess had already drawn back her crimson spear and hurled it toward Enlin's heart in the blink of an eye. Paramount heavenly god technique, lightless eternal silence. A crimson line pierced through space and instantly struck Enlin's light barrier. The tip of the spear was inscribed with symbols of death, each of which was powerful enough to slay a powerful living being, and there were over 100 million of these symbols fused into the tip of the spear. The moment it collided with the light shield, there was no burst of energy like divine light. Instead, there was a lightless darkness, a deathly stillness. It was like a pure black that easily penetrated the light shield. Enlin was already prepared for this, and his body had already shifted to the side in the instant that the crimson spear struck toward him. But what he didn't expect was that the blood spear also changed the direction of its thrust at the same time. It changed its direction at the same time. It was as if death and Enlin were already bound together, and there was no way to change that. Chapter 23:53. At this moment, Enlin's reflexes were elevated to the extreme, and golden ripples erupted from his eyes before spreading to a radius of over 3,000 meters. Everything within the golden ripples froze in place. The air, energy, laws, space, and even the earth-shattering crimson spear were all frozen on the spot. Tom had stopped, and Lin chuckled. No matter how powerful your lightless eternal silence was, can it outrun time? And Lin took advantage of this opportunity to twist his body, upon which a terrifying scene unfolded. The crimson spear also twisted along with him. He twisted to the left, and the spear tip also twisted to the left. He flew into the sky, and the spear tip also flew into the sky. Both of them were like a shadow, and they were positioned in the exact same position. And Lin, the crimson spear quickly broke free from the time freeze. It was aimed directly at Enlin's heart. Enlin had already positioned his evil-slaying sword in front of his heart at the last moment. Ding! The crimson spear clashed with the inky black sword, upon which a crisp clang erupted. At this moment, the extremely powerful blade began to pierce through heaven and earth as it advanced with unstoppable force. Even if there was a heaven-crushing holy tool in front of it, it would not be able to stop its unstoppable blade. Enlin could feel the immense pressure emanating from the evil-slaying sword, and he resisted with all his might, but his body was pushed back by the boundless force in the end. The crimson spear pushed Enlin's body into the ground like a crimson meteor before exploding violently. The power of death and the power of annihilation erupted at the same time, transforming into a reddish-black ball of light that annihilated everything between heaven and earth. Space, energy, matter, life, laws. Everything was obliterated by this explosion. Even the great Tao of heaven and earth tremored violently, as if it were about to explode, The Earth within a radius of tens of thousands of kilometers had been engulfed by the explosion, and a gargantuan black skull with red eyes rose into the air, as if it were looking down upon the world with a sinister smile. All of the living beings on the Tai Chu continent could see a dark skull-shaped star in the center of the Tai Chu continent, illuminating heaven and earth for an instant. Giant Enlin, Tina was sent flying by the terrifying explosion, and just the shock waves from the explosion were enough to make her shudder with fear, let alone Enlin, who was at the center of the explosion. Patriarch Zhu Yin also pissed his pants. The Fortune territory was almost completely destroyed by this attack. Those primitive beasts that took turns to attack him were also sent flying by the explosion, including himself. It was even injured by the aftermath of the explosion. Moreover, it was an injury that penetrated deep into the origin of creation. Patriarch Zhu Yin knew that if this thing were to fall upon him, he would definitely die, and it would be a complete and utter death. Fellow Taoist Enlin, can you survive this? Patriarch Zhu Yin looked at the sinister skull before him as death and destruction wreaked havoc in his body. What an arrogant and terrifying technique. The heavenly lord of Tao and Virtue's eyes also flashed with a hint of wariness as he sensed the destructive power approaching him. He didn't know if Enlin would be able to withstand it, but if he had to withstand this move, he would definitely be blown up badly. All of the living beings of the White Nectar Sea also turned toward Enlin. The crimson-eyed black skeleton was slain by Tina's sword, and the energy around it quickly dissipated. In a world that had been completely destroyed, there was still a figure standing amidst the chaos and nothingness. Tina was initially ecstatic upon seeing this figure, but her heart immediately sank. The white-robed man had been wounded beyond recognition, and his snowy white robes had been stained red with blood. Red wounds that represented death and black wounds that represented destruction covered his entire body, and a massive hole had been punctured into his heart. Even though he was holding his evil-slaying sword in front of his heart had still been punctured. Giant Enlin, what happened to you? Tina immediately unleashed her most powerful healing spell technique, without any hesitation. She placed her trembling little hands on the edge of his empty heart as tears welled up in her eyes. To her horror, she discovered that Enlin's life force was on the brink of being severed at any moment. Furthermore, the terrifying power of death surging through his body kept all healing powers at bay, as if he had been struck by a lethal attack from a high-quality jade hairpin. There's no hope for Enlin. He's dead meat. This attack is over 100 times more powerful than my previous lethal attack. The life goddess chortled with elation at the sight of Enlin's pitiful state. PFFF. The life goddess didn't even get a chance to finish laughing before she threw up a mouthful of blood, and her aura quickly diminished. The divine halo above her head had turned green, but there were many cracks on it. Life goddess, stabilize your aura and take deep breaths. Don't let this overexertion break our three-phase, true heavenly reincarnation formation, the heavenly sea god reminded in an urgent voice. The life goddess was also in a terrible state, and this was a very good opportunity to land the killing blow. However, Tina didn't have time to deal with her. Instead, she was frantically unleashing healing spell techniques on Enlin, injecting all of the healing divine pills stored in her divine mirror world into Enlin's mouth. The evil-slaying sword also began to move on its own before plunging viciously into Enlin's chest. Vanquish the heavens and slay all evil. Purification. An extremely powerful purification power surged forth in a frenzy to nullify the power of death and destruction within Enlin's body. This was a process where one had to fight against the death god, so there was no room for hesitation. Damn it, why is he still breathing? The life goddess expression instantly darkened upon discovering that Enlin was still clinging to life. The jade hairpin hovered in the air as a fearsome light erupted forth. You have to calm down, life goddess. You need to rest and recover, so you can't be so impulsive. Otherwise, we're going to be pummeled by that little fairy. The heavenly heaven god was given a fright upon seeing that the life goddess still wanted to fight. The life goddess finally regained a hint of composure upon hearing this. She slowly inserted the jade hairpin back into her long black hair before looking into the distance. There, close to 100 primordial beasts had already pummeled Patriarch Zhu Yin to death. Patriarch Zhu Yin's gargantuan body lay sprawled on the ground, having basically lost all ability to continue fighting. "Go, my children, end him!" The heavenly life goddess issued a command, and a dozen or so primordial beasts unleashed their terrifying auras as they quickly converged on Enlin. Controlling the prehistoric beasts also consumed the power of creation. She was already at her limit in her current state, allowing a dozen prehistoric beasts to unleash their full combat power. Of course, the life goddess could also rely on the power of the heavens and the land of creation to recover. This was an extremely terrifying circulation system, and it was almost impossible to defeat in a prolonged battle. Her objective was very simple. All she had to do was disrupt Tina and the evil-slaying sword's healing. That way, the power of death and destruction would be enough to destroy Enlin's body. However, right at this moment, another two loud cries erupted in the heavens. "Sect Leader Enlin, I'll protect you. Who dares to touch Big Boss Enlin?" Chapter 23:54. A bright blue pillar of water fell from the sky before crashing viciously into one of the eerie flame Dark Kuin's bodies. The eerie flame Dark Kuin let loose a blood-curdling wail as it plummeted to the ground, and even its soul-burning flames were extinguished by the pillar of water. Lan Xiaoni descended from the sky, and her fishtail swept through the air like a fan, sending the fastest crimson lightning immortal rock flying for several hundred kilometers. Paramount Heavenly God Technique, Heavenly Sea Wall. Lan Xiaoni spread open her arms, and an ocean erupted from the ground, connecting heaven and earth. The boundless power of water fused into the ocean, transforming it into a paramount water defense. The dozen or so prehistoric beasts saw the boundless ocean towering in front of them. They had no way to go around it, and could only crash into it. The boundless resistance within the ocean made them feel as if they had crashed into a boundless viscous liquid, and they were unable to break through it in a short time. Lan Xiaoni kept the first wave of attacks at bay before turning toward Enlin with concern and unease in her eyes. Only after Shangguan Yi arrived beside Enlin did she heave a sigh of relief. Shangguan Yi stood between Enlin and the heavenly life goddess, and her glacial essential power surged from her body as a snowflake-shaped formation materialized beneath her feet. "With me here, you won't be able to hurt Enlin." The heavenly life goddess gritted her teeth as she sensed Shangguan Yi's boundless glacial essential power. "Are you done? Was there no end to it? Are you trying to bully us because we don't have enough people? Calm down, heavenly life goddess." The heavenly heaven god was panicking. "There's no need for us to fight with them. We can still win if we keep this up. There's no way he can be saved." The heavenly sea god was afraid that the goddess of life would charge into the fray, and he tried to calm her down. However, right at this moment, a cry of surprise erupted. "Ah, the healing is working. Giant Enlin, how are you feeling?" Tears welled up in Tina's eyes as she looked at Enlin, who was gradually recovering his vitality. Tears welled up in Tina's eyes as she pressed her exquisite face against Enlin's, and her pointy ears twitched in an attempt to express her joy. Heavenly sea god, the heavenly heaven god, the life goddess, shut up! The goddess of life was enraged. She glared at Enlin, and her killing intent grew stronger and stronger. However, for now, she didn't make a move. Shangguan Yi's glacial aura forced the life goddess to calm down. Enlin slowly opened his eyes and saw the crystal-clear, snow-white blade piercing into his body, as well as the elf who was doing everything in her power to heal him. He was greatly moved. Tears welled up in his eyes at the sight of Shangguan Yi and Lan Xiaoni. "Little Xia, little Na, underling Lan, sister Shangguan. Thank you." The goddess of life exploded with rage. "Damn you, Enlin. Don't freeload off a woman." "Enlin, I freeload off a woman because I'm good at it. Why are you freeloading?" And Lin immediately retorted with a cold smile. He had a clear conscience, and there was a hint of pride in his words. The life goddess was rendered speechless. Lan Xiaoni and Shangguan Yi blushed slightly upon hearing this. However, they didn't say anything in the end in light of Lin's injuries. Meanwhile, above the white nectar sea, Tian Yi turned to the heavenly lord of Tao and virtue with a curious expression. "Aren't you going to help them?" The heavenly lord of Tao and virtue stroked his beard with a smile. "That's enough. If I continue to battle the life goddess, I'm going to suffer backlash from the heavenly Tao." He wasn't a brute like Patriarch Zhuyin, who relied entirely on instinct in battle. He knew how far he could go against the heavenly Tao and how he could avoid backlash from the heavenly Tao. If he continued to attack the life goddess, then the backlash from the heavenly Tao would be even more terrifying than the backlash from Patriarch Zhuyin. The heavenly lord of Tao and virtue wanted to help Lin and all the other living beings on the Taichu continent. But he wasn't willing to sacrifice his essence of creation in order to help the Taichu continent. In the end, this calamity, this catastrophe, was not a battlefield in which he was the master. "The goddess is summoning me. I'll be going now." Tian Yi bade farewell to the heavenly lord of Tao and virtue politely before flying toward the realm of creation. Meanwhile, on the realm of creation, a dozen or so berserk primordial beasts were finally showing signs of breaking through Lan Xiaoni's heavenly sea wall after being bombarded by spell techniques. Lan Xiaoni gritted her teeth and was just about to unleash her divine halo of water again. "Alliance leader Lan, we're here to help you." Flowing Gold released a torrent of red ink Genesis Chi that condensed into a giant blade that ruthlessly slashed at one of the rock demons, severing its arm that was trying to forcibly break through the wall. The silver spear in Blackstone's hand was like the Milky Way descending from the ninth heaven. It hacked down on a scarlet feather golden crow, causing it to fall from the sky to the ground. The three living beings appeared around a heaven-encompassing jellyfish, and they attacked it relentlessly with their lightning. They were even naughty and playfully slicing off the jellyfish's tentacles, making them appear like three-headed kids. All three of them were exhausted gods of creation, but each of them could hold off one or two primordial beasts. Previously, they didn't dare to intervene because they felt like they were facing a bunch of primordial beasts on their own. However, things are different now. They were a team, so their power was on a completely different level. On top of that, they also had Mou and Tianyi with them. Lan Xiaoni was feeling a lot of pressure from facing a dozen or so primordial beasts, but she was finally able to heave a sigh of relief now that she had the help of so many gods of creation. Mr. Lin has so many friends to help him. I'm very relieved." Patriarch Zhuyin was sprawled on the ground by close to 100 primordial beasts, and a relieved smile appeared on his face upon seeing this. At this moment, little Xie completed another heaven-defying feat. She purified the power of death and destruction within Lin's body and pulled Lin back from the brink of death. The vast and boundless medicinal power of the divine elixir began to quickly heal his injuries. "Thank you, little Xie." And Lin pulled out his evil-slaying sword with a grateful expression. "Idiotin, you're such a troublemaker. If you sustain such severe injuries again, I'm not going to save you no matter what." Little Xie's voice sounded, and she seemed to be very angry, but her voice was getting weaker and weaker, clearly indicating that she was exhausted, and Lin's heart throbbed with pain, and a golden light erupted from his hand as he injected a burst of divine weapon origin energy into the evil-slaying sword. "Idiotin, you don't say anything and focus on what you're feeling." And Lin interjected before injecting another burst of divine weapon origin energy into the evil-slaying sword. "Don't do that. I don't want this thing." Little Xie harumphed. "You've exhausted all your energy in order to save me, so let me do something for you." And Lin injected another burst of divine weapon origin energy into little Xie's body as he spoke. No, no." The evil-slaying sword trembled lightly, and Lin's hand faltered momentarily. "Don't stop." Little Xie's voice was as soft as a mosquito's. Chapter 23:55. A knowing smile appeared on Enlin's face, and he unleashed another burst of divine weapon origin energy upon little Xie's body, giving her an extremely comfortable feeling. Idiot, don't get too ahead of yourself. I'm not greedy for the comfortable feeling that you're giving me. It's just that your divine weapon origin energy can indeed replenish my energy and allow me to fight better. Little Xie tried to maintain her pride, but her voice was tinged with a faint murmur. Enlin sounded like a spoiled daughter, and he couldn't help but smile. Yes, yes, yes. You're the cutest. You're always right. The evil-slaying sword let loose a loud ringing sound, and it turned around to attack Enlin. However, Enlin reacted quickly and unleashed a burst of divine weapon origin energy to render the evil-slaying sword limp again. Phew! That was close. Enlin wiped the cold sweat from his forehead before turning his attention to the battlefield. The battlefield had already been split into two sections. Lan Xiaoni unleashed a heavenly sea wall to slice open the realm of creation, thereby isolating a bunch of primordial beasts on the other side of the realm of creation. Tianyi, Mou, and the other god of creation stage mighty figures were on the other side of the realm of creation, dealing with the ferocious primordial beasts. The life goddess and Shangwan were locked in a tense standoff on the other side of the heavenly sea wall, creating a delicate balance. Of course, this balance was going to be broken by Enlin. That spear just then hurt so much. Enlin held his evil-slaying sword as he turned toward the life goddess, and his new five-elemental power began to surge within his body. The life goddess' chest rose and fell violently with rage upon seeing Enlin recover so quickly, and she glowered at Enlin with a hateful expression. Enlin was recovering, and so was the life goddess. This was evident from the fact that more and more primordial beasts were beginning to attack the heavenly sea wall. There had only been a dozen or so primordial beasts before, but there were now over 30 of them. The ecosystem in the land of creation that had been destroyed by the explosion was recovering at a speed visible to the naked eye. Even the bottomless pit had lush divine trees growing out from the bottom of the pit. However, Enlin knew that the life goddess power was recovering and the realm of creation was flourishing. What was truly important was her essence of life. The life goddess actually didn't have much essence of life left. Even her life paramount divine halo had dimmed and cracked. How much longer could she last? With this in mind, Enlin's confidence was boosted a few notches. Enlin, how about you rest a little longer? Your external injuries have already healed, but your internal injuries and essence are still extremely severe. Tina could sense Enlin's condition, so she transmitted her voice to him. Leave the battle to me and Big Sister Shangwan. Enlin was naturally aware of his own condition. Enlin is, and he, of it, Lin said. Lin, it's not a bad idea to join forces to scare the life goddess. Tina heaved a faint sigh of relief upon hearing Enlin's voice transmission. She gripped her sword again and turned toward the life goddess. The essential power of her divine mirror was unleashed without reservation. A round mirror that could reflect all things between heaven and earth appeared behind her. It was pure, flawless, and all-encompassing. The three most powerful auras were all locked onto the life goddess. Not only was the life goddess feeling pressured, but even the heavenly heaven god and heavenly sea god were also struck by an unparalleled sense of pressure. Life, let's retreat, the heavenly heaven god said decisively. The life goddess didn't want to give up. She pointed the jade hairpin in front of her toward the woman enshrouded in frosty energy. Perhaps they're just trying to scare us. Let's see if they dare to stand in our way. The colorful jade hairpin pointed its sharp tip toward Shangwan Yi's glabella. Rich power of death converged, exuding an extremely lethal aura. The jade hairpin shuddered slightly before instantly piercing through the air toward Shangwan Yi's glabella at a speed faster than the speed of light. Everything happened far too quickly, to the point where even gods of creation were unable to detect this attack, and it was already too late for them to react. This was a sure-kill attack that was imbued with the power of the three-phase true heavenly reincarnation formation and the Tao true form of the goddess of life. Regardless of whether it was in terms of speed or penetrative power, the jade hairpin was at its peak, and no god of creation would be able to ignore it. If it were a weaker god of creation, they would probably be able to envision themselves being blasted apart by now. However, this indomitable jade hairpin's penetrative power began to decrease after entering the blue domain of extreme cold. Its speed began to decrease rapidly, and its fatal danger and aura were also frozen to the greatest extent. The essential power of extreme frost was omnipresent, and it could be used to control enemies and defend oneself. Shangguan was finally able to see the trajectory of the jade hairpin after it had been slowed down, and the hairpin brushed past her hair before stabbing into the air behind her. A few strands of her hair fell to the ground. This signified the complete failure of the life goddess attack. Oomph! The life goddess expression darkened, and she flicked a finger toward the jade hairpin, upon which it swerved around at an exaggerated angle before stabbing toward Shangguan Yi's back again. However, Shangguan didn't even have a chance to evade this time before a little fairy appeared behind her and sliced the jade hairpin in half with her world sword. Shangguan reacted extremely quickly and immediately understood what the little fairy was trying to do. She immediately teleported toward the life goddess and lashed out with a palm strike that was imbued with the power to freeze everything within a radius of 5,000 kilometers. 9 Extreme Frost Heavenly Snow Lotus. A snow lotus blossomed in Shangguan Yi's hand. At the same time, layers of interdimensional barriers began to appear around the life goddess. Shangguan Yi's slap landed on the interdimensional barrier, only to be kept at bay by the peerless, absolute defense. However, cracks began to appear on the interdimensional barrier again as the snow lotus blossomed. This snow lotus could even seal the interdimensional barrier in ice before dominating it. However, everything happened too slowly. The life goddess had already retreated in time to evade Shangguan Yi's attack. However, it was also at this moment that a black streak of light pierced through the cracks in the interdimensional barrier, and the combined power instantly punctured the interdimensional barrier. 6 strikes of the war god, Shadow Tiger. Lin transformed into a series of afterimages as he closed in on the life goddess. His sharp sword tore through the air like a shadow's claw before disappearing in a flash. The life goddess was unable to evade in time, and another deep gash appeared on her delicate shoulder as her dress was stained red with blood. Lin didn't manage to stab any fatal spots, and just as he was about to continue, the life goddess had already turned around and raised her leg. As her flowery dress rose into the air, her snowy white, well-proportioned leg mercilessly swept toward Lin's waist. Boom! The force of the kick sent Lin flying for over 1,000 kilometers as he threw up a mouthful of blood. Chapter 23:56. Lin was almost asphyxiated by the life goddess kick, and his body, which had just recovered, was severely injured again. That kick had been imbued with pure power, but he didn't think that the life goddess would be able to break through his body of the war god with just her power alone. Why was she using her foot? Perhaps it was because it felt better to kick someone. The feeling of punching and kicking flesh was a great way to vent her anger. This was a clear indication of just how much the life goddess hated Lin. The life goddess wanted nothing more than to pummel Lin with her fists. But she knew that she couldn't do that. She didn't have the ability or the opportunity to do so. And so, Shangguan Yi and Tina attacked again. The life goddess paused for a moment before making a decision. 9 Extreme Glacial Light Torture. Shangguan Yi charged forward and pointed a finger into the air. A beam of blue light fell from the heavens, piercing straight into the center of the earth. The life goddess was struck by the glacial light, and her body quickly froze before instantly shattering into shards of ice. Insta-kill. Tina was slightly taken aback by Shangguan Yi's surgical technique. Was this woman really that bad? SS? No, that's only a strand of her hair. Shangguan Yi's expression shifted slightly at the sight of the disappearing ice shards, as well as a lock of frozen, dark green hair. She felt like the life goddess was sneering at her. After all, the life goddess had only sliced off a dozen or so strands of her hair with her jade hairpin. It was as if the life goddess was hinting to her that she could only slice off one strand of hair at most. How could he be so petty? She got away. I can't detect her at all. Tina was a little dazed, and she immediately unleashed a detection spell technique to try and find any traces of the life goddess. However, it was as if the life goddess had disappeared into thin air. Shangguan Yi's brows furrowed tightly as she unleashed her glacial essential power, which even seeped into every flower and plant in the realm of creation, but she still couldn't detect the life goddess aura. Where could she have gone? Beating the life goddess until she ran away was quite an inspiring feat, however. This was far from enough. If he couldn't take care of the life goddess and the other two paramount heavenly gods here, then what was the point of this battle? Lin, can you sense where the goddess of life is? Shangguan Yi turned toward the white-robed man in the distance. There was nothing wrong with Shangguan Yi's idea. Lin and the heavenly life goddess were both paramount heavenly gods, so there was a certain level of connection between them. Perhaps Lin and the heavenly life goddess will be able to find clues through some special means. Lin flew over and immediately unleashed his most powerful detection and deduction technique, the divine simulation technique, upon hearing Shangguan Yi's words. Invisible ripples enveloped an area of tens of thousands of miles. Everything was reflected in his eyes. Every living thing was exposed in his eyes. There's actually nothing? Lin was stunned for a moment. However, he didn't give up. Instead, he gritted his teeth and pushed the divine simulation technique to its limits, continuing to expand the range of the technique. This time, it directly enveloped the entire creation territory. Come at me, heavenly life goddess. I refuse to believe that you're going to give up on this creation territory. Lin absorbed everything within the fortune territory into his eyes, allowing him to sense everything within the fortune territory. He finally discovered where the goddess of life was. I've discovered where she is. Lin smiled. So she's using a special spell technique that allows an individual life form to attach itself to a group of life forms. Not only can this completely conceal her aura, but it can also disperse the risk. And Lin continued to analyze the situation, and a smile had already begun to appear on his face. Both Shangguan Yi and Tina were astonished to hear this. They didn't think that such a special life spell technique could exist. One had to realize this spell technique could even disperse one's life essence. Then where is the heavenly life goddess attaching herself to? Shangguan Yi asked, and Lin pointed to the other side of the heavenly sea wall with a smile. She split herself into 81 parts, and they're all attached to those 81 primordial beasts. Tina's eyes lit up as she stared at the 81 primordial beasts. No wonder the auras of those 81 primordial beasts are so powerful. Let's hurry over. With so many primordial beasts moving around at once, they won't be able to hold on for much longer. Shangguan Yi quickly flew toward Lan Xiaoni atop her ice lotus, and Lin was just about to follow along when he was struck by a rush of dizziness. Giant and Lin, are you all right? Tina immediately flew to his side. I'm fine. I'm just a little tired. And Lin shook his head as he forcibly stabilized his injuries. Your consciousness and essence have yet to recover. If you continue to fight like this, you'll only worsen your injuries. Leave the rest to Big Sister Shangguan Yi and me. Tina knew just how severe Lin's injuries were, and she immediately tried to dissuade him. If Lin were in a good condition, he wouldn't have been kicked by the heavenly life goddess. If Lin were in a good condition, he wouldn't have to resort to a sword technique like the Shadow Tiger. It could be said that Lin's ferocious appearance was actually all an act. Lin tapped a finger on Tina's forehead with a smile. Don't worry, I won't force my way through this. Furthermore, I have a powerful spell technique that can pose a huge threat to the heavenly life goddess without burdening my body. Tina blinked her emerald eyes with a hint of surprise in her eyes. You can pose a huge threat to the heavenly life goddess without burdening your body? Does such a spell technique really exist? Trust me, and Lin replied. Meanwhile, on the other side of the heavenly sea cliff, 81 primordial beasts roared as they unleashed a frenzied barrage of attacks toward the gods of creation. Each and every one of them could unleash God of creation stage power, and their combined power was more than enough to crush an entire continent. Lan Xiaoni, He Shi, Flowing Gold, the three living beings, Mou, and Tian Yi were all under extremely heavy pressure, and they were all plunged into an arduous battle. Patriarch Zhu Yin had just recovered a little, but he was only able to hold off a dozen or so primordial beasts, and he was only able to hold them off by taking a beating himself. At this moment, a few dragon blood mammoths hundreds of thousands of feet in size had already crashed into the heavenly sea cliff in a frenzy, and they had successfully blasted a hole into the heavenly sea cliff. How? The dragon blood mammoths roared with glee. TSK, TSK. My injuries have all healed, so why are these primordial beasts still crashing into the heavenly sea cliff? Are they retarded? A white-robed figure appeared beside Lan Xiaoni. Big Boss and Lin. Lan Xiaoni's eyes shimmered with tears as she turned to look at the man beside her. If it weren't for the fact that she had to maintain the heavenly sea cliff, she would have hugged him already. And Lin patted Lan Xiaoni's head with a smile. Thank you for your hard work, underling Lan. It wasn't hard at all. A sweet smile appeared on Lan Xiaoni's face as she narrowed her eyes like a blissful kitten. And Lin looked down at the mighty primordial beasts with a calm expression. Leave these monsters to me. Chapter 23:57. Hold on a little longer. Our goddess is coming. Flowing Gold was knocked to the ground by a white tiger with the wings of a storm angel, and it spoke with great difficulty. Even our goddess won't be able to keep so many ferocious beasts at bay, right? The three living beings spoke as they evaded the attacks of the 5 Holy Spirit beasts. During their evasive maneuvers, one of their heads was devoured by one of the Holy Spirit beasts, upon which it howled in pain. At this moment, Tina and Shangguan had already entered the battlefield. An ice lotus of extreme frost blossomed beneath Shangguan Yi's body. 9 extreme ice snow lotus realm. A massive ice lotus constructed from the essential power of extreme frost began to expand at a rapid rate. Not only was the power of absolute frost capable of freezing all matter, energy, and even laws of nature. Heaven and earth within a radius of 4,000 kilometers was almost instantly enshrouded by the ice snow lotus realm, and a dozen or so Holy Spirit beasts were all frozen into ice sculptures. Heavenly God technique, myriad mirror essence. Tina wielded her divine mirror world sword, and countless specks of light unfurled behind her before transforming into streaks of astonishing golden light that fell upon the Holy Spirit beasts. Each of the streaks of golden light was imbued with the most powerful divine mirror power, and they were able to slice through the bodies of mountain giants, slice through the scales of WYRMS, and pulverize the bodies of holy horned demons. Over 20 Holy Spirit beasts were slain in just one strike. Shangguan and Tina's thoughts were very simple. The goddess of life had divided her life force among the 81 Holy Spirit beasts. So what would happen to the goddess of life if they killed all of these Holy Spirit beasts? Even if they didn't die, they would at least be severely injured. Unfortunately, there was no way that they could kill 81 Holy Spirit beasts in one go. Killing 40 Holy Spirit beasts was already their limit. Crap, their life force essence is being transferred. Tina could sense that a peculiar power within the body of the prehistoric beast she had slain was undergoing a transformation. It's the same here. Shangguan had discovered that the giant beasts that had been frozen into ice sculptures also possessed some kind of mysterious power, and they were like unkillable cockroaches that were moving toward the beasts that were still brimming with energy. Both Shangguan and Tina were completely powerless to do anything upon seeing this. Having just released their top-notch moves, they truly didn't have the strength to deal with those 41 terrifying prehistoric beasts. At the same time, the dead beasts also showed signs of resurrection under the effect of the power of creation. Once those prehistoric beasts are resurrected, Won't the origin of life find another target to transfer to? If I can't kill all the primeval beasts in one go, can I completely erase this source? How troublesome. Tina and Shangguan Yi's brows were tightly furrowed, and they couldn't think of a way out of this situation. As for gods of creation like obsidian, flowing gold, it was even more difficult for them to do so. Is it finally time for me to appear? And Lin, who was standing on the sky sea wall, smiled as he watched the prehistoric beasts wreaking havoc in the land of creation. Big Boss and Lin, your current condition. Lan Xiaoni knew that Enlin was very powerful, but she also knew that there was no way he would be able to take on 41 giant beasts in his current condition. Watch me. When has your big boss ever disappointed you? Enlin took a step forward as his white robe fluttered in the wind. Even though he was severely wounded, he was still able to unleash his peerless battle intent without any reservation. Now, I'm going to show the heavenly life goddess and all of the living beings what the power of money is. Come on out, immortal sword. Enlin's storage ring flashed. Whoosh, an immortal sword appeared in the sky, exuding a devastating sword intent. Lan Xiaoni was just about to ask what an immortal sword would do when she was completely rendered speechless by the scenes unfolding before her eyes. She could only look on with wide, dumbstruck eyes. Streaks of light appeared. 10 immortal swords flew through the sky. Even so, the sword projections didn't stop as one sword projection after another surged forth from the storage ring. In the blink of an eye, 100 immortal swords had filled the entire sky. But do you think this is the end? Not at all. The immortal swords continued to pour forth as if they were free. 200 immortal swords, 300 immortal swords within the white jade sea. All of the heaven-crushing united army cultivators who were paying close attention to the creation territory were astonished to see one immortal sword after another appear in the sky. Isn't that my sword, the purple lightning azure, frost immortal sword? A sword immortal at the return to Void Pinnacle stage exclaimed. He recalled how he had reluctantly sold his sword in order to raise money for his tribulation transcendence. Ah, that's my immortal tool, the cloud-severing immortal sword. A return to Void stage light wing clan mighty figure exclaimed. Michael's lips twitched upon seeing this. The dragon-slaying immortal sword and Kuan Wu immortal sword that I sold to the Celestial Arch are also in Enlin's possession. The legendary top-rate immortal swords, Tai Ah sword and 3 Sovereign Sun Moon sword, are also in Enlin's possession. Gabriel murmured to himself. She had always wanted the 3 Sovereign Sun Moon sword. After all, it had a very good chance of evolving into a divine sword. However, not long ago, it was purchased by a mysterious buyer in the Garden of Eden's treasure vault. Who would have thought that the buyer would be Enlin? The battling Buddha was dumbstruck by the sight of all the immortal swords flying forth, and he couldn't help but swear, Holy F***CK! How many immortal swords has Big Brother Enlin collected? The immortals from the Divine Source Continent were the most astonished. In their Divine Source Continent, the most top-rate weapons were immortal tools, and all of them were things that exalted immortals could only dream of possessing. However, they were witnessing something unimaginable. The number of immortal tools in the sky was several times more than the number of immortal tools they had seen in their entire lives. Just how rich was Enlin? Not only were the immortals from the Divine Source Continent astonished, but even the experienced and knowledgeable mighty figures from the Taichu continent were also dumbstruck by the scene unfolding before their eyes. Soon, a total of 1,000 immortal swords filled the entire sky. All of them glowed with vibrant immortal light, and the sword Tao aura that converged was even able to warp heaven and earth. Even the great Tao of the sword was naturally activated, as if there was nothing in this world that they couldn't slash through. 1,000 immortal swords appearing at the same time. This is a miracle. This is definitely a miracle. The Holy Martial Clan super mighty figure, the Lord of the Sword, had a scorching light in his eyes as he spoke with excitement on his face. What is Enlin trying to do? Could it be that he's trying to activate an unprecedented sword Tao formation? He wasn't the only one with this thought. All of the other living beings were also thinking the same thing. Even the billions of living beings on the Tai Chu continent who were silently watching the live stream were thinking the same thing. All of their eyes were wide with anticipation, anticipating the emergence of that invincible sword formation. Enlin raised a hand high into the air and made a grabbing motion. 6 strikes of the war god, sword burial. Bam, bam, bam. Bam, bam, bam. In the sky, one priceless immortal sword after another self-detonated like the most dazzling fireworks, instantly lighting up the entire night sky of the Tai Chu continent. All of the living beings on the Tai Chu continent felt as if their hearts had stopped and their minds had gone completely blank. What kind of scene would it be to have 1,000 immortal swords explode at the same time? No one could understand that feeling unless they experienced it themselves. In that instant, the sound of countless hearts shattering erupted across the Tai Chu continent. Venerable Lord Sword's eyes were as wide as bronze bells. He took a deep breath and another deep breath before he could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. PFFF and Lin, what the F asterisk CK did you do? Chapter 2358. How much did an immortal sword cost? The cheapest was at least 1,000,000 spirit stones. Top-rate immortal swords could cost several million to tens of millions of spirit stones. Hence, how much did 1,000 immortal swords cost? A few billion at the very least. And now, 1,000 immortal swords had exploded right before their eyes. It was as if a tycoon had just burned a few billion spirit stones in front of their eyes. One had to realize a return to Void stage mighty figure only had a net worth of a few million spirit stones. All of the living beings on the Tai Chu continent felt their hearts convulse. In particular, all of the mighty figures who had viewed the immortal swords as precious treasures felt as if their hearts had been shattered by the sound of those immortal swords exploding into countless shards. They were like children who had been blown up by Enlin. At this moment, a single phrase appeared in the minds of almost all of the living beings present. Indescribably tragic. If one had to describe this indescribably tragic, it would be inhumanly rich. Hurry, hurry, disciple. Hurry up and get your master's heart-relieving pill. Ah, my heart, my heart. Countless living beings clasped their hands over their hearts in fear that they would suffocate from overexcitement. This was definitely an unprecedented spectacle on the Tai Chu continent. This was the most extravagant, money-burning moment. 1,000 immortal swords had self-detonated at the same time. What kind of concept was that? Even super mighty figures wouldn't be able to dream of such an exhilarating spectacle. The great Tao of Sword was also trembling uncontrollably. No one knew whether it was trembling from shock or from anger. But in any case, its emotions were very unstable. Setting aside Michael and the others, even the god of creation stage mighty figures like Flowing Gold, Blackstone, and the 3 living beings were all dumbstruck. They felt like their heads were buzzing. Giant Enlin said he was going to detonate immortal swords. I have a few dozen of them here. Tina smacked her lips as if she was trying to calm her astonishment. Big Boss Enlin, what are you trying to do? Lan Xiaoni was even stuttering. Even though she was the leader of the West Sea Alliance, she had never seen such an astonishing spectacle. If Enlin's goal was to scare people with money, then he had undoubtedly succeeded. He had successfully scared the living beings of the entire Tai Chu continent. Even Nuwa and the heavenly lord of Tao and virtue stared blankly at the scene unfolding in the sky. They didn't know what to say or what to say. In the night sky, the immortal swords that filled the sky turned into fragments. Even if it was a fragment, it still retained the unique multicolored brilliance of an immortal artifact, and it was countless times more resplendent than the stars that filled the sky. This was the most expensive romance, the most unforgettable fireworks. The epic and magnificent scene in the sky was dazzling in this moment of doomsday. It was so breathtaking that some living beings felt that even if they died at this moment, their lives would still be complete. However, this was only the beginning for Enlin. He had collected so many immortal swords back then, all for this moment. A black sword mark appeared on his forehead. The supreme sword will spread. It pulled the fragments of the immortal swords that filled the sky. Every piece of shard was bursting with extremely terrifying energy. The essence inside was 100% released. Not only that, but the sword intent imbued within the immortal swords was also unleashed to the extreme, and all types of sword Tao phenomena were formed. What the hell is this? All of the living beings widened their eyes as they looked up into the sky. In the sky, there were ancient wisdom kings wielding light swords, illusory lightning dragons tearing through the firmament with their claws, 10,000-year-old ancient trees as verdant as swords, earth-shattering meteors streaking across the sky, divine flowers that dreamed for 1,000 years dyed the firmament pink, countless sword spirits dancing in the night sky, interpreting the true meaning of the way of the sword, and countless ancient sword immortals releasing heavenly phenomena, pointing their swords at the earth, sword Tao phenomena that were powerful enough to make the hearts of all living beings tremble began to appear. Each and every one of them unleashed the true intent of the sword Tao to the extreme. Some of the sword cultivators felt like their heads were about to explode from the comprehension of the sword Tao just by looking at the sword Tao phenomena. And Lin had perfectly integrated the paramount true intent of the sword he had attained into each and every immortal sword fragment, thereby making the immortal swords even more fearsome and fearsome. The phenomenon of the sword Tao filled the entire sky and enveloped the entire land of creation. It was almost boundless. No living beings were thumping their chests and stomping their feet, and no living beings were cursing and swearing. They all knew that Enlin wasn't wasting these treasures. Instead, he was allowing these immortal swords to unleash the most dazzling and glorious moment of their lives. All of the living beings on the Tai Shu continent stared blankly at these sword Tao phenomena. These sword Tao phenomena were extremely dazzling, beautiful, and powerful to the extreme. This was a grand occasion for billions of living beings, and it was a grand occasion for all sword cultivators to witness. How extravagant! Niwa had lived for countless years and had seen many things, but her scalp was still tingling with fear at the sight of Enlin. Ha! I didn't come for nothing this time. The heavenly lord of Tao and virtue chortled with glee. He seemed to be very excited as he repeated, I really didn't come for nothing this time. Sword Tao phenomena covered the entire sky. This was a sword Tao phenomenon that was powerful enough to slice apart the entire universe. And Lin pointed his hands toward the sky, and he became the sword monarch who commanded all of the extreme sword Tao phenomena. Almost all of the living beings held their breaths. Lu Qianhuan's face became flushed as she looked on through the 4-9 Immortal Sex live stream, and her breathing accelerated as she gripped the hilt of her sword tightly. She knew that the most spectacular sword Tao technique in history was about to be unleashed. The black sword insignia above Enlin's head glowed with the darkest light. Immortal tools shatter. Intoxicate all life. When the heavens shatter, I reverse yin and yang with 1,000 swords. Sword fall. The white-robed sword immortal commanded. All of the extreme sword Tao phenomena in the sky began to fall from the heavens. At that moment, heaven and earth seemed to have lost their luster. The boundless sword Tao phenomena were the only things left in everyone's eyes. They were going to smash heaven and earth into smithereens and turn the entire battle on its head. Sensing the boundless sword power, the insufferably powerful prehistoric beasts couldn't help but shiver and shiver uncontrollably. However, they did not resign themselves to their fate. Instead, they unleashed terrifying spell techniques in an attempt to resist the boundless sword Tao power. Boom, boom, boom. Unimaginable clashes of energy erupted, and the space within a radius of over 100,000 kilometers was completely shattered. The sword Tao phenomena in the sky merely shuddered before continuing to descend. The power of the sword Tao, gathered by 1,000 different phenomena, was unstoppable. The ancient sword monarch projection sliced the WIRM in half with a single sword strike. The Ching-Su immortal sword pierced into the body of the gargantuan Kuan several 100,000 feet in length, upon which countless sword projections erupted, tearing the gargantuan Kuan to shreds. Even the primordial beast, heavenly armored black tortoise, with extremely powerful defensive abilities, was surrounded by several different phenomena, and even its shell was pulverized into dust. Meteorites crashed into the land of creation, razing the ground within a radius of over 5,000 kilometers. The entire land of creation had been transformed into a slaughterhouse for primordial beasts. Even the most powerful primordial beasts could only wait to be slaughtered. This was Enlin's trump card, the most powerful pay-to-win attack in history. 1,000 Sword Toss. Chapter 2359. At the realm of creation, thousands of sword Tao phenomena descended upon the world, striking all living beings with an unparalleled sense of awe. When the phenomena attacked the giant beasts, they were even more astonished. This was a battle on the level of the primeval age. Each and every immortal sword had a history that was imbued with the essence of time, and the phenomena they displayed were also imbued with the aura of time. This was very similar to the situation shown by the great desolate beasts. There were ancient immortals slashing furiously with swords, and there were also shadows of mysterious thunder, heavenly dragons at the great desolate realm fighting fiercely with the real great desolate flood dragons. One was a projection materialized from an immortal tool, while the other was a real giant beast. The battle between the two of them was like a battle between a fake and a real beast, but was the fake not a match for the real thing? Not necessarily. These fakes had released all the strength and essence in their bodies in an instant. It was as if they were using self-detonation to light up the passage of time. Even if they died, they would exchange it for an instant of invincibility. Furthermore, they were imbued with Enlin's paramount Sword Tao true intent, so the power they unleashed was even more powerful than that of the real giant beasts. On top of that, there were usually several phenomena attacking a single giant beast at once. The remaining 41 giant beasts were all crushed by an unimaginably one-sided attack, and all of them fell to the ground with blood-curdling cries. Even the giant beasts that had been slain by Tina and Shangguan were about to be resurrected were being whipped by the phenomena, and they had no chance of being resurrected. A massive sword made of heavenly flames crashed into the forest of divine trees, setting the forest ablaze for thousands of kilometers around it. A mountain-piercing beast transformed its scales into a sword, and with its supreme sword power, it instantly destroyed several hundreds of thousands of meters tall, enormous primitive divine mountains. A lithe and graceful female, sword immortal, plunged her inky black, immortal sword into a river, and the black sword intent completely corroded the river before spreading toward the earth, causing all of the plants to wilt and all of the living beings to perish. Not only were the giant beasts affected, but all of the living beings within the realm of creation, as well as all of the matter and energy within the realm of creation. That's right, and Lin had already thought this through. Wasn't the goddess of life supposed to be very bad, *SS? She was able to transfer her life force to another living being, so he would destroy all of the living beings within the realm of creation. That way, he would be able to cut off all of the goddess of life's escape routes. Boom, boom, boom. Collisions and explosions continued to erupt. The might of the sword Tao caused the heavens and earth to explode at the same time. Boundless divine light surged through the earth within a radius of hundreds of thousands of kilometers, and even the entire Tai Chu continent tremored violently. What kind of sword technique is this? The Holy Martial Clan's Lord Sword was dumbstruck. He suddenly felt like his own sword technique was really trash. Venerable Lord Sword was not the only one who thought so. Even Tina, who had also peered into the origin of swordsmanship, wondered what she had been practicing when she saw the scene before her. This spell technique could even be said to have transcended beyond the god of creation stage, and it wasn't something that an ordinary god of creation could learn. That required money. Everything in the Fortune territory was flattened. All the prehistoric beasts were chopped into mincemeat or even particles by the extremely powerful phenomenon. Slowly, the phenomenon began to disappear, and the power began to dissipate. After the phenomenon completely disappeared, that beautiful place of creation that contained miracles of life was gone. What greeted them was a wasteland with a radius of hundreds of thousands of kilometers, as well as countless earth-shattering sword Dao scars. And Lin stood at the center of the wasteland, and his white robe was completely spotless. All of the other powerful beings and mighty figures were struck by a sense of reverence and yearning upon seeing this white robe. That sword strike had completely flipped their worldview on its head. As expected of the #1 war god of the Tai Chu continent. Such power and such invincible might. He truly deserves this title. Thank you, war god Enlin. You've shown me just how bad *SS my sword can be. I feel like Enlin is going to have another title after this battle. What title? The #1 sword immortal of the Tai Chu continent. No one objected to this. Instead, they all nodded in agreement, setting aside the fact that Enlin had unleashed this technique through the power of money. His sword Dao had truly shocked all of the living beings on the Tai Chu continent. All of the prehistoric beasts have been blasted to smithereens, and the Fortune territory has also been destroyed. Is everything over? The heavenly sea wall beneath Lan Xiaoni's feet had also been blasted into nothingness, and she stood silently in midair as she looked down at the wasteland before her. And Lin took a deep breath and smiled as he sensed the energy within his body that had almost been completely depleted. I don't know if it's over or not, but I've already done everything I can. Is that it? Lan Xiaoni's lips twitched as she looked down at the wasteland that stretched as far as the eye could see. Other gods of creation could only kill a few prehistoric beasts at most, but Lin was far more powerful. Not only had he insta-killed several dozen prehistoric beasts, but he had also destroyed his enemy's home, should I say, as expected of Big Bossin. The little fairy flew in the air and looked down at the ground below with a smile. The goddess of life attached her life essence to the primordial behemoths. Now that the primordial behemoths have all been insta-killed, it's equivalent to her life essence being completely destroyed. Even if she can transfer her life essence, there's nothing that can do that right now. In other words, the goddess of life has been defeated by Giant Enlin. This was an extremely satisfying victory. It looked like Enlin had been 2F* king humble when he said that he had a way to wound the goddess of life. This wasn't just wounding her, this was slaying her. It was just that slaying her was a little expensive. It would cost a few billion spirit stones. What happened to the goddess of life? That was the question that everyone was concerned about. Enlin didn't even need to unleash his senses anymore. He knew that even if the goddess of life wasn't dead, she wouldn't be able to hide. Sure enough, a huge green egg appeared out of thin air at the center of the Fortune territory. This was most likely the escape route that the goddess of life had prepared in advance. After the eggshell cracked open, a woman of dreamy beauty emerged from within. Her figure was peerlessly lithe, and her eyes were as red as the setting sun. Her long black hair danced in the wind, and her skin was even whiter than the moon. She was a top-tier goddess. However, this goddess was no longer as arrogant and aloof as she was before. Her eyes were filled with horror and unease, and she wrapped her arms tightly around her chest like a trembling kitten. There was even an indescribable sense of horror and confusion in her eyes as she looked at Enlin. Why? Why is this happening? The goddess of life's resentful and aggrieved voice suddenly sounded. Not only are you powerful, but you even called upon so many terrifyingly powerful helpers. Not only did you call upon so many terrifyingly powerful helpers, but you even threw money at me. I've already worked so hard. I've already given it my all, but I've still been utterly defeated. The goddess of life's eyes reddened as she looked at Enlin, and 2 streams of tears flowed down her face. All the spectating beings were dumbstruck. She was crying. The goddess of life had been beaten to tears by Enlin. Enlin was the most astonished of all. This was the first time that he had seen the goddess of life in such an abnormal state. Had this paramount heavenly god been beaten silly by him? Chapter 2360. Enlin, I hate you. I really, really hate you. The life goddess mentality had indeed been completely crushed by Enlin. She no longer cared about her dignity as a goddess. All she wanted to do was to vent her emotions. At this moment, she was like a helpless little girl who was enraged and powerless. When Yuwa saw this scene, she couldn't help but be moved. A paramount heavenly god who ruled over life and death had been forced into this state. It had to be said that Enlin really was quite powerful. Patriarch Zhu could still recall the terrifying sense of impending doom that he had been struck by during his battle with the goddess of life. At that time, the goddess of life had been completely different from this weeping woman, and he felt as if he were in a dream. Enlin didn't have any tender feelings toward the life goddess, and he was completely unmoved by her tearful complaints. In fact, he even pulled out his evil slaying sword. At this moment, a white light had already appeared over the eastern horizon. The light of dawn shone down upon the dilapidated earth. An exquisitely beautiful woman in a flowery dress was surrounded by a group of gods of creation. This was the end of the path for the heavenly life goddess, as well as the heavenly heaven god and the heavenly sea god. They no longer had any power to resist. Enlin, Tina, Lan Xiaoni, Flowing Gold, Black Stone, the three living beings, Mou, Tian Yi, Patriarch Zhu, all of these super powerful beings were powerful enough to dominate an entire realm, and all of them silently unleashed their auras to shake the heavens and earth. The life goddess was situated at the center of this boundless sea of auras, and her body trembled uncontrollably as she was intimidated by this terrifying aura. The heavenly heaven god and the heavenly sea god didn't know what to say. Persuade the life goddess not to give up? He even didn't want to give up now. They couldn't find any way to turn the tables at this juncture. She's already been forced into such a dire situation, but she's still able to maintain her true form of the Tao of life. Furthermore, the three-phase true heavenly reincarnation formation is still operating. This is very admirable. Enlin's expression finally changed slightly upon seeing the goddess of life's condition. Of course, he knew that this was only the life goddess' final act of stubbornness. The life force of the goddess of life had been ravaged to the point that only an empty shell was left. It would burst like a bubble at the slightest touch. It was no exaggeration to say that any Tao integration stage super mighty figure could pummel the life goddess. That was why the life goddess was in such despair. The sun rose from the east. The world began to have color and warmth. Enlin looked at the pure sunlight on the horizon. It was as if he had finally succeeded after a desperate battle. It was so warm, so full of hope and future. The sun has risen. The old order is coming to an end. Enlin walked toward the life goddess with his evil slaying sword in hand. Suddenly, a voice rang out in everyone's ears. Katja! It sounded like something had broken. Something seemed to be coming out. The great Tao of heaven and earth trembled violently at this moment. Then, countless living beings exclaimed in shock. Look, why is the sky so bright? The sun doesn't seem particularly bright anymore. Why has the sky become like this? Could it be? All of the mighty figures looked up into the sky. They could sense a holy light in the sky that all living beings yearned for. Enlin's footsteps faltered as he looked up into the sky, and his inky black pupils contracted slightly. He immediately charged toward the life goddess, and the most terrifying sword projection erupted from his evil slaying sword as he slashed toward the woman with the tear stains on her face. Vanquish the heavens and slay all evil. Final Tao. Enlin's evil slaying sword was imbued with the purest Tao, which transformed into black lines. He was like the emperor of all Tao, and he plunged the sharpest sword into the life goddess' chest. Blood splattered through the air. He was extremely fast, and his attacks were even more ferocious. The life goddess was in an extremely feeble state, and her heart was pierced by the evil-slaying sword before she even had a chance to react. Air! The life goddess' body trembled violently as blood seeped from the corner of her mouth. She seemed to have realized that her life was about to come to an end, and she extended a slender finger in an attempt to point it toward Enlin's forehead. Enlin didn't do anything else. Instead, he focused all of his attention on the evil-slaying sword in an attempt to slay the life goddess as quickly as possible. All of a sudden, a beam of light fell from the sky, as if it were the beginning of time and the beginning of chaos, illuminating the inky black evil-slaying sword. The inky black blade of the evil-slaying sword, which was made of an extraordinarily powerful material, began to twist and distort upon being illuminated by the light. There were even bursts of black smoke rising from its body. The sword trembled violently, as if it was enduring extreme pain. Countless black lines of Tao also began to shrink and crumble at this moment. Enlin's ultimate technique against the paramount heavenly god had been nullified in that instant. Everything happened extremely abruptly, and everyone was dumbstruck as they turned their eyes toward the sky. Only Enlin seemed to have anticipated this, and he immediately drew his sword and retreated just as the beam of light was about to strike him, thereby evading it. "Who is it?" Tina's expression shifted as she also turned toward the sky. The heavenly life goddess, the heavenly sea god, and the heavenly heaven god were all extremely excited. They could sense where that power belonged. "It's the light goddess. The heavenly light goddess is here to save us." The three paramount heavenly gods were the first to identify the heavenly light goddess. In the sky above, a hazy projection of a woman shimmering with golden light appeared. No one was able to see her full appearance. She was like an absolute being who stood proudly above the clouds, yet she also transcended beyond this world. Enlin's eyes narrowed slightly. "I'm helping you eliminate your enemy, but you're going to stop me?" The woman didn't say anything, as if she felt like this wasn't worth her time. Has she finally completed her transformation? The life goddess looked up at the powerful figure in the sky, with complex emotions welling up in her heart. Her former nemesis was now using its power to save her. Did she still have the right to compete with the light goddess? She had already been reduced to a complete loser. At this moment, the light goddess spoke in a voice that was as clear as the rising sun. "I can grant you power. Are you willing to cooperate with me?" This was directed at the three paramount heavenly gods. The life goddess and the heavenly heaven god both faltered upon hearing this. "Of course we're willing." The heavenly sea god was the first to speak. The life goddess and the heavenly heaven god didn't expect the heavenly sea god to agree so decisively. At this moment, the heavenly sea god was already trying to persuade them. "Life goddess, heavenly heaven, hurry up and agree. The heavenly light goddess objective is to destroy the entire human race, which is partially in line with our objective. Why don't we complete a small objective first? It's better than dying for no good reason, don't you think?" It had to be said that this made a lot of sense. The life goddess and the heavenly heaven god were also tempted. Chapter 2361. The heavenly heaven god and the heavenly life goddess didn't agree, but that was all because of their previous alliances. The heavenly sea god clearly didn't have that concern. After all, the heavenly sea god was on the same side as the heavenly light goddess. At the end of the day, he was just returning to his original alliance. The life goddess also knew that she didn't have many choices left. Either she joined the light faction or she would be killed by Enlin. Just as they were hesitating, another terrifying power suddenly swept toward them. Shangguan descended upon the heavenly life goddess, and a vortex of extreme frost materialized in her palm before crashing down upon the life goddess with extremely terrifying killing intent. The divine mirror world sword in Tina's hand glowed with an extremely powerful divine mirror power as it stabbed toward the life goddess chest from the other side. Two extremely powerful god of creation, stage powerful beings were attacking the life goddess at the same time. It was also at this moment that an extremely holy and pure beam of light fell from the sky before enshrouding the life goddess body. This light was even more transcendent than chaos, and it seemed to contain all the power of light in this world as it formed an absolute domain. Shangguan Yi's vortex of frost was purified into countless particles of light, and Tina's divine mirror world sword was repelled by the light. Just a single beam of light was able to keep both Shangguan Yi and Tina at bay. What kind of light is this? Tina's expression was one of incredulity. She could sense an unsurpassable power emanating from this light. The woman in the sky gradually took on the form of the moonlit night monarch. She was even more beautiful and dreamy, but she spoke in a cold voice, the light of absolute beginning. Perhaps this light would be engraved in everyone's memory, so she chose to reply. At this moment, another voice sounded. "I'm willing to join the light faction," the heavenly heaven god said. I'm also willing." The life goddess bit down on her lower lip after a brief internal struggle. The light goddess smiled for the first time. Her smile was extremely vibrant and mesmerizing. "Light nurtures all, and life creates miracles. I bestow upon you light." A star-like particle of light flew out from the heavenly light goddess Glabella before instantly disappearing into the heavenly life goddess Glabella at a speed that even gods of creation stage beings could not keep up with. "From now on, the three of you will be responsible for delaying these people, especially Enlin," the heavenly light goddess said to the three paramount beings. After absorbing the speck of light, the heavenly life goddess Aura underwent another transformation, and she became full of vitality again. It was like a dying plant that had been in darkness for a long time had suddenly welcomed the bright and beautiful sunlight, and it began to glow with infinite vitality. Light is what life loves the most. Otherwise, there would be no photosynthesis. Similarly, the heavenly light goddess also liked the heavenly light god. It was just that their views were different, so they were in opposition. The heavenly life god yearned for light, and she could also be resurrected by light and become even more powerful. After doing all this, the heavenly light goddess suddenly turned toward the east, and her expression became grave. "There's no more time. I'll leave this place to you." After saying that, without waiting for the life goddess and the others to reply, she suddenly turned into a streak of light and flew directly to the east, disappearing from this world. The goddess of light came and went like light. Everyone's heart screamed in alarm. What else could he do by heading east? The heaven-crushing Glaze Palace was located in the northeast of the Purple Star ruins. The heavenly light goddess was trying to disrupt Shun Shun and Cyril's heaven-crushing plan. "No, I have to stop her." The battling Buddha was extremely anxious upon seeing this, and he was just about to fly toward the east with his golden-banded staff. "Calm down, Wukong." Michael grabbed the battling Buddha by the arm. "What are you doing? Don't stop me. Our heaven-crushing plan can't fail." The battling Buddha glared at him. "The heavenly light goddess has undergone her second transformation, and we don't even know how powerful she has become. Even top-rate gods of creation like Tina and Shangguan Yi are unable to do anything to her. Do you think you'll be able to do anything?" A resigned expression appeared on Michael's face. "But we are heavenly disciple candidates of the heaven-crushing sect. Are we not going to do anything?" The battling Buddha gripped his staff tightly, and his golden eyes were filled with unyielding battle intent. "So what if we can't win? In the path that I, old son, walk, there is no path of retreat without a fight." At this moment, Michael was stunned. He discovered that the battling Buddha's aura was a little different. It was as if he was about to break through some kind of barrier, and an extremely terrifying aura was brewing within him. Before Michael had a chance to say anything, the battling Buddha had already flown toward the east. "So be it, I'll go as well." Michael took a reluctant glance at Enlin before spreading open his wings and flying toward the east. At this moment, a light began to manifest on the heavenly life goddess Glabella, and she tapped her foot lightly onto the ground, upon which all things began to grow. Her aura was also elevating at a rapid rate. The heavenly life goddess is quickly recovering her powers. "We can't let her continue like this. We have to stop her." Enlin immediately spoke upon sensing the changes taking place in the heavenly life goddess body. Paramount heavenly god technique, Raging Sea Dragon. Lan Xiaoni immediately unleashed all of her power to materialize a golden WY over 100,000 feet in length, which crashed toward the heavenly life goddess with boundless might. The heavenly life goddess extended a palm and thrust it through the air. Bam! The terrifying power of the heavenly realm crashed toward the raging sea dragon like an invisible wall, pulverizing the dragon's head into countless balls of water. At this moment, Blackstone's spear, flowing gold saber, the three living beings' soul attacks, Mou's world strike, and Tianyi's strange bubbles also hurtled toward the heavenly life goddess at the same time. The heavenly life goddess unleashed her earth-shattering waves, which were imbued with the extreme power of the heavens and the power of the ocean, engulfing all of these god of creation attacks. It was also at this moment that Shangwan, Yi, and Tina unleashed their final trump cards. The extreme power of frost instantly froze the waves into ice, completely freezing all of the energy within. Tina broke through the ice with her divine mirror world sword, and her sword tore through all of the defensive energy before crashing down toward the heavenly life goddess head. A faint smile appeared on the heavenly life goddess face at this moment. Bam! A crisp sound erupted. The extremely sharp and transparent divine mirror world sword struck a peculiar shield of light, but it was completely unable to advance any further. Do you think the light goddess gave me a light star just to recover my power? The heavenly life goddess smiled as an extremely dangerous light flashed through her eyes. Did you know the grand primordial light? I know how to use it too. As soon as he finished speaking, the light shield that was formed from the fusion of platinum and gold suddenly shot out an arrow-like ray of light, piercing through the little pixie's body at an extremely fast speed. Chapter 2362. Tina. Lin's heart jolted upon seeing this, and his body immediately shot forth to catch the little fairy in his arms before evading another attack of the Light of Origin. The Light of Origin landed behind Lin, but it was as if a normal beam of light had struck the surface of a mound and was unable to damage it at all. However, this beam of light was able to pierce through all of Tina's defenses and puncture her body. This was extremely terrifying. The heavenly life goddess was not in a hurry, even though she had failed to land the killing blow. Instead, she took this opportunity to quickly recover her power. The power of light bestowed upon her by the heavenly light goddess was not permanent. Just like the power of darkness that Lin had bestowed upon little Xie and the Dark Wing Emperor, it was a consumable. Whether she used it to kill her enemies or recover her power was up to her. However, the power of light bestowed upon me by the heavenly light goddess is truly unbelievably vast. The heavenly life goddess was extremely astonished as she sensed the boundless power of light within her body. If it weren't for the fact that the heavenly light goddess was in a hurry, she would definitely be able to crush everyone here. This power of light was simply far too powerful. At the very least, it would be able to crush top-rate gods of creation like Lin and Tina with ease. Giant and Lin, I'm fine. Get away from me. Tina stabilized her injuries and unleashed her divine mirror essential power to finally repress the residual power of the Light of Origin within her body. And Lin took a deep breath before quickly retreating. He was currently in a very poor state, so he wouldn't be of much help even if he participated in the battle. As such, it was better for him to recover his power before continuing the battle. At this moment, Flowing Gold, Mou, Shangwan Yi, and the other gods of creation were still unleashing their attacks. However, the heavenly life goddess was only focusing on defense and very rarely used her power to retaliate. Instead, she focused all of her power on recovering her own power. Everyone was extremely anxious to see this, but there was nothing they could do. The only fortunate thing was that Shangwan, Yi, and Tina were often able to force the heavenly life goddess to use her Light of Origin to defend herself or retaliate. This Light of Origin was an extremely precious item, and it was very likely that it would be depleted with each use. This could be inferred from the heavenly life goddess retaliation. However, the Light of Origin was still being depleted. The light of origin had already mostly recovered. It was also at this time that her recovery stopped. The heavenly sea god and the heavenly heaven god both faltered upon hearing this. Life, what are you doing? Hurry up and recover your strength. The heavenly sea god urged. The power of the Tai Chu light was countless times more potent than a divine pill. So he had to recover as much as possible before slapping everyone in the face. The heavenly heaven god, who had been disgusted by Lin and Tina's pills, also chimed in agreement. Why did they suddenly stop? That's enough. Now, my supreme authority of life will be able to slowly heal us. I have other uses for the remaining primordial light, the life goddess said with a smile. A spatial shockwave blasted Blackstone and MOU away. The goddess of life gripped the air with one hand, and the enormous tripartite, true heavenly reincarnation formation enveloped the world once again, revealing itself to the world. A beam of light shot out from between her brows and fused with the tripartite, true heavenly reincarnation formation, causing the formation to undergo a fundamental change. The power of heaven, the paramount power of the ocean, the paramount power of the sky, the paramount power of life, and now, the power of the paramount power of light. Tripartite, true heavenly reincarnation formation, activate. The life goddess aura soared to its peak, and all of the power within her body surged forth. Boom, boom, boom. The earth tremored violently, for gargantuan divine statues plummeted from the sky, crashing down in all four directions, encompassing all of the gods of creation. These divine statues were over 1 million feet in size, and they corresponded to the heavenly light goddess, the heavenly life goddess, the heavenly sea god, and the heavenly heaven god, respectively. A peculiar barrier of light connected the four paramount heavenly gods, encompassing the heavens and earth to form an enclosed space. The light barrier was formed from the powers of the four paramount heavenly gods. Blue, green, white, and golden divine lights revolved around the light barrier, creating an unbreakable cage that trapped everything within it. There was an opening. Tina instantly appeared in front of the life goddess, and her sword twisted space as she slashed toward the life goddess' neck. Whoosh! The life goddess was decapitated. The sword strike was far too fast, to the point where the life goddess didn't even have time to evade. That was a beautiful assassination. All hail the mighty goddess. Flowing Gold was already whooping with elation upon seeing this. However, Tina's expression was extremely grave. She watched as the goddess of life's head was separated from her body, which then turned into countless flower petals and disappeared on the spot. Even her essence disappeared. Flowing Gold was a little dumbstruck. In the next instant, an exquisitely beautiful woman appeared outside the peculiar light barrier. She looked down at all of the gods of creation with a faint smile on her face. You want to kill me? Sorry, but you won't have a chance now. Boom! A lethal, frosty power suddenly soared into the sky, freezing everything it came into contact with. Shangguan transformed into an ice phoenix and flew through the air toward the life goddess. Her frosty aura threatened to freeze everything in this world. However, the life goddess merely looked on with an extremely calm expression. The ice phoenix crashed into the light barrier created by the true four-element reincarnation formation, and its anguished wails erupted into the heavens. The extreme frosty power was completely unable to break through the light barrier. Not only that, but its head was even pulverized by the recoil force of the light barrier. The life goddess looked at the headless ice phoenix beneath her feet and smiled smugly. You can't even deal with the light of Genesis. So how are you going to deal with this true four phases reincarnation formation formed by the fusion of the powers of the four supreme heavenly gods? Shangguan appeared in the sky again with a hint of exasperation in her eyes. She knew that she really couldn't break through this formation. This true four-element reincarnation formation looks very strange. And Lin's eyes reflected everything between heaven and earth as he activated his divine simulation technique. Its defensive prowess is extremely powerful, to the point where it's boundlessly powerful. However, I don't feel any threat from it. What do you mean? Lan Xiaoni blinked, which means its offensive prowess is extremely weak. And Lin replied, Huh, how is the life goddess going to fight us then? Lan Xiaoni was even more dumbstruck. She could sense that the life goddess had already injected all of her power into this formation. Generally speaking, after obtaining more power, the first thing that came to mind was to beat up Big Boss and Lin, right? However, the formation didn't seem to have any offensive prowess, which was very perplexing to her. Did the life goddess not want to take revenge? The life goddess smiled upon seeing Lin's perplexed expression. And Lin, you're right. The true four-element reincarnation formation is also known as the true four-element reincarnation formation. It gathers all of the paramount powers of the heavenly gods and can seal off all living beings within its range. The heavenly light goddess told me to stall you, but she didn't tell me to kill you. This is the best and safest choice, isn't it? The life goddess smiled with a relaxed expression. Now, all of you can do is wait for the heavenly light goddess' triumphant return. Chapter 2363. The heavenly life goddess had indeed obtained an extremely abundant amount of power of light, and she did indeed possess the ability to retaliate. Everyone thought that she was going to bash Lin with all her might. But in fact, she made a decision that surprised everyone. She focused all of her power on defense and used the true four elements reincarnation formation to construct the most powerful shield. After that, she used the shield to surround all of the gods of creation. In the past, I would most likely fight you to the death again, but I'm different now. The heavenly life goddess had seen through many things after wandering between life and death. There are many ways to defeat all of you. There's no need to fight to the death. There's only one thing I have to do, and that is to trap all of you and make you wait for the light to return before I kill you. The heavenly life goddess had learned her lesson. In her battles with Lin, and Lin was always able to create miracles and turn the tables. She had already been completely petrified by Lin. Even if she felt like she could defeat Lin and the others now, she didn't dare to do so. After all, she was confident that she could defeat Lin and the others for sure. What happened in the end? Didn't he almost die? The intelligent heavenly life goddess finally thought of a foolproof plan. It was always like this. Lin would always turn the tables when he was forced into a corner. Seeing that, I won't fight you anymore. I'll use all of my defensive power to create a small black room, and you can all go wherever you want. Everyone was astonished by this decision. All of them were struck by an indescribable sense of complex emotions upon realizing the heavenly life goddess' intentions. As expected, the heavenly life goddess was no longer the same heavenly life goddess. This woman, how badly had she been bullied by Lin? She had clearly obtained unparalleled power, but the first thing she thought of when facing Lin was defense. Didn't she see that Lin didn't even dare to fight her now? The cowardly heavenly life goddess seemed to be completely oblivious to what these powerful beings were thinking. She raised her chin with a smug expression, as if to say, "What can you do to me?" And Lin pondered for a moment and gave the life goddess a thumbs up. "That's awesome. Did you see that? And Lin is mocking us. And Lin is mocking us. We obtained such great power, but instead of killing him, we built a turtle shell on the spot. Why are you so scared?" The heavenly sea god couldn't take it anymore. "What do you know? This is called retreating in order to advance, minimizing mistakes." The life goddess pointed at Patriarch Zhuyin, Mou, and the others, who were attacking the light barrier with all their might. "Do you see that? They're the ones panicking, not us." "I support the idea of life," the heavenly heaven god suddenly said. "You?" The heavenly sea god opened his mouth, but he didn't know what to say. Of course, he knew that life's choice this time was reasonable, but he just felt so angry. He had to suppress a breath of anger in his heart, and his thoughts weren't clear. Shangguan Yi, Tina, Flowing Gold, Blackstone, Mou, the three living beings, Tianyi, Lan Xiaoni, Patriarch Zhuyin, and Lin all attacked the true heavenly four elements reincarnation formation at the same time in an attempt to break it. Terrifying energy converged, reducing everything within a radius of tens of thousands of kilometers into chaos. However, this great formation was even sturdier. It only trembled intensely from the bombardment, but it didn't break, sturdy to the point where it made one's hair stand on end. Who would have thought that it really would be this resolute? A sense of powerlessness welled up in Lin's heart as he looked at the indestructible formation. He became more and more concerned about what had happened to the heaven-crushing Glaze Palace. The heaven-crushing sect was currently at a critical juncture. If they couldn't stop the heavenly light goddess, what were they going to do? It would not be an exaggeration to describe the current situation as extremely urgent. Every second that they were trapped here meant that the heaven-crushing sect was in even greater danger. Drunken demon, fist of the heavenly Tao. All of a sudden, boundless demonic energy soared into the clouds in the distance. An extremely powerful fist projection shot forth for several hundred kilometers, pulverizing everything in its path before crashing toward the life goddess above the formation. Demon Emperor Ciyu had suddenly attacked. The people within the formation were unable to do anything, but the powerful beings outside the formation were able to attack the life goddess. Demon Emperor Ciyu's combat prowess was equivalent to that of a god of creation stage cultivator, so his fist was earth-shattering. A surprised expression appeared on the life goddess' face as she looked at the oncoming fist. She wasn't surprised by how powerful Demon Emperor Ciyu's attack was. She was only surprised that Demon Emperor Ciyu had the guts to face her head-on. Slap! The goddess of life slapped Demon Emperor Ciyu across the face. The sky tremored, and the sea toppled over. The power of the supreme heavenly gods that was as boundless as the ocean howled out and crushed the fist that was surging with an imposing aura. After that, the fist smashed heavily into Demon Emperor Ciyu's chest under his horrified gaze, causing his chest to cave in and rupture. His entire body felt like it was on the verge of falling apart. PFFF. Demon Emperor Ciyu flew through the air as blood gushed from his mouth. His eyes were filled with confusion and confusion. Didn't you say that you were going to focus all of your power on the true four elements reincarnation formation? You liar. The life goddess chuckled upon seeing Demon Emperor Ciyu's expression. I've been tricked so many times already. Don't you know how to save some power for self-preservation? A person's growth was always forced upon them. This was also the case for the growth of a paramount heavenly god. Demon Emperor Ciyu's spectacular entrance and tragic demise left Lin and the others feeling deflated before they even had a chance to get excited. Even a god of creation stage ally was unable to help them. What should they do next? Tina and the other god of creation stage mighty figures didn't give up. They continued to unleash spell techniques to attack the true four elements reincarnation formation. However, after being infused with the power of the light of absolute commencement, the level of this formation had already exceeded the level of a god of creation stage formation. Tina could even sense a power similar to that of the heavenly tomes restriction. This was a little terrifying. Fight to your heart's content. I'll concede if you can create even a single crack in the formation. The life goddess sat at the center of the formation with a faint smile on her face. Lin was very anxious, but he couldn't do anything about it. Time ticked by, and the more this continued, the more anxious they became. Niwa heaved a faint sigh. It was hard to tell whether she was feeling exasperated or regretful. Lin, is this the end of the line? The heavenly lord of Tao and virtue was also filled with a forlorn expression. This is bad. The light has appeared, but the darkness has disappeared. If this continues, Lin is going to fail, just as the hearts of billions of living beings were gradually sinking to rock bottom. The ethereal cry of a deer sounded from the distance. Chapter 2364. The deer's cries were far and far away, and the sound of its footsteps struck deep into everyone's hearts. It was as if it were treading upon the great Tao of heaven and earth rather than the earth itself. Who's there? The life goddess body froze, and she instinctively fused her body into the true four elements reincarnation formation to form an absolute defense. Her vigilance was very strong. She wasn't going to underestimate any strange person. This phenomenon also attracted the attention of Enlin and the others. They all turned toward the direction from which the deer's cries were coming. A nine-colored deer slowly made its way over a vast expanse of lush green grass. Its body was long and lean, and its colors were ever-changing. There was a mortal mist revolving around its antlers, and every single part of its body was imbued with a sense of perfection. On top of such a mystical nine-colored deer sat a Taoist with a languid expression. This Taoist priest had a pair of inky black eyes, and he was very handsome. He wore a strange floral robe, and he looked completely different from the transcendent nine-colored deer. However, no one was going to underestimate this Taoist priest. Everyone here was a god of creation, stage, mighty figure. For such a strange being to barge in under such circumstances, there was no way he was going to be an ordinary being. The Taoist priest appeared to be very young, but Enlin could sense that he had aged quite a bit. At this moment, the Taoist priest began to speak again. Heaven and earth shall correct itself. No one knew what he was saying, but it sounded very bad *SS. Who is this person? Enlin asked curiously. Tina was dumbstruck. Shangwan, he was also at a loss. In contrast, Patriarch Zhu Yin had lived for a very long time, and an expression of excitement and incredulity appeared on his face. Isn't he Taoist monarch Luya? What? Taoist monarch Luya? Everyone's expression changed drastically, and Lin drew a sharp intake of breath upon hearing this. It was him. The grandpa that he had been thinking about day and night had finally appeared. Furthermore, he appeared in such a handsome manner, and Lin was not completely unprepared for this. After all, Chang had once told him that Taoist monarch Luya was a handsome and graceful man, and Lin forced himself to calm down. No matter what, the other party was his benefactor who had given him the system and led him on the path of cultivation. It would not be an exaggeration to say that he was half a teacher. He had to leave a good impression on Doubtful Luya. Luya, Enlin shouted. The Taoist in flowery robes looked up at Enlin and smiled. Enlin, I'm glad we can meet again. It really was Doubtful Luya. Enlin shouted in agitation. Luya, F*CKU. You F*King made me so miserable. Enlin exploded. Luya was stunned, and Lin's rage turned into an infinite burst of machine guns. Why didn't you tell me in advance that the system has so many traps? It's good to give me a heads up. Do you know how desperate I was? Do you know how much I suffered? Do you know how desperate I am when I see a billion push-ups? Do you know how frightening it was for me to be struck by lightning? You know And Lin threw a punch toward Doubtful Luya, and it was as if heaven and earth were raging. However, the punch was blocked by the light barrier of the array. Doubtful Luya heaved a sigh of relief upon seeing this, and a warm smile appeared on his face. Hee. There was a reason for everything. Calm down, Doubtful and Lin. I'll explain everything to you after this. Make you cry. Make you poo. And Lin frantically used spell techniques on Doubtful Luya, but none of them worked. They were all blocked by the light barrier of the true four elements reincarnation array. Doubtful Luya's lips twitched, and he turned toward the goddess of life. When the rest of the kids saw the scene before them, they were all shocked. So Enlin and Doubtful Luya had an ill-fated relationship? What kind of grudge did he have for him to do this? That aside, the goddess of life's expression was no longer as calm as before, but she was not panicking either. Her expression was just a little more serious. You want to save them? The goddess of life asked coldly. I can't say that I'm saving them. I just want to increase their chances of winning. Doubtful Luya laughed heartily. He opened the gourd hanging from his waist and poured a mouthful of wine into his mouth. The nine-colored deer beneath him continued to walk forward in a leisurely manner. Hee. Aren't you afraid of the backlash from the heavenly Tao? Even if you don't die, it will severely affect your Tao, right? The goddess of life seemed to be fearless as she chuckled. Downlord Luya drank another mouthful of wine from his gourd before shaking his head. I know what to do. After all, the heavenly Tao is very busy right now. The goddess of life silently reinforced the true four elements reincarnation array to its limits. If the sky is still the same after this battle, you won't be able to avoid the backlash. Besides, do you think you have the ability to break my array? At this moment, Downlord Luya had already finished all the wine in his gourd. An extremely sharp aura slowly proliferated into the surroundings. His eyes turned inky black as he looked at the true four elements reincarnation array. They shone like black jade, but at the same time, they were like the most penetrating mirror that could see through everything in this world. How I know if I don't try? He murmured to himself as he swirled the wine gourd in his hand, as if he was going to pour wine out of it. However, before the wine was poured out, a small knife shining with silver light was poured out by him. In an instant, a terrifying knife chi filled the world. If Dubai is humiliated, I will be magnanimous. Your array appears to be flawless, but it has a fatal flaw. Downlord Luya spat out a mouthful of blood essence onto the silver dagger. The appearance of the silver dagger didn't change at all, but the power it unleashed suddenly increased by several hundred times. An indescribably terrifying killing intent appeared in the world. The blade of the dagger wasn't aimed at the gods of creation, but all of them instinctively shuddered, and they even felt as if they were going to be sliced in half. Go, immortal slaying saber. Downlord Luya issued a command. The silver dagger instantly stole all color from heaven and earth. It slashed through the air in an unimaginable trajectory, and everything in its path was sliced in half by absolute slicing intent. No one could describe the magnificence of this saber strike. However, all of the powerful beings present could sense its extreme Tao realm. Flowers, plants, trees, slash. Birds, beasts, insects, and fish, slash. Floating clouds, slash. Vital energy, slash. The laws of heaven and earth, slash. The heavenly Tao, slash. 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 Even perfected immortals who stood proudly outside the universe would be slain. That's right, the immortal slaying saber wasn't going to slash earth immortals or heaven immortals. It was going to slash the heavenly true immortals who were above God of creation, setting aside whether or not it had the ability to do so. Downlord Luya's intent alone was already at the pinnacle of this world. Heaven and earth transformed into black and white. The immortal slaying saber, on the other hand, was white on the outside and black on the inside. Under this special Tao realm, the power of the true heavenly reincarnation formation fused with extreme clarity, and the four paramount powers of the heavenly Tao seemed to be exposed. The immortal slash saber pierced through the true heavenly reincarnation formation like a streak of light. The power of the heavens, life, the ocean, and the sky were all unable to stop it, and were all sliced in half. The light of absolute beginning managed to slow down the immortal slash saber, but wasn't able to completely stop the immortal slash saber. The immortal slash saber continued onward and pierced through the formation. There was no earth-shattering collision in this clash. Even the peerless aura of the immortal slash saber, which was capable of slicing through all things, had been ground to dust by the formation. The black and white world disappeared. Everything seemed to have returned to normal. However, everything had changed. Under the astonished gazes of Enlin and the goddess of life, the light barrier of the true heavenly reincarnation formation suddenly exploded into countless particles of light. Only a single saber remained, and it was still suspended in the air. Chapter 2365. One slash. Just one slash was enough to shatter the true heavenly four elements reincarnation formation that countless gods of creation could do nothing about. Even now, Enlin and the others were still reminiscing about that saber strike. That extreme saber realm had moved them immensely, and even their Tao realms were beginning to waver. In particular, flowing gold, who was proficient in sabers, was struck by the urge to become his disciple. No, how could this be? My true heavenly four elements reincarnation formation has clearly set up its defenses to the extreme. How could it? The life goddess' features paled, and her eyes glazed over as her lips trembled. She was clearly unable to accept this reality. Crimson blood flowed from the corners of her lips. The life goddess aura also quickly began to wane. The backlash that the true heavenly four elements reincarnation formation had inflicted upon her was extremely terrifying. Downlord Luya looked at the life goddess and shook his head. You didn't set up your defenses to the extreme. From the very beginning, you made a mistake by combining the light of origin with the powers of the three paramount heavenly gods. You made an even bigger mistake by treating the light of origin as a power on par with the powers of the three paramount heavenly gods. What do you mean? The life goddess' eyes widened. What I mean is, you overestimate your own strength. It's like tying a tiger and three pigs together during a hunt, and the three pigs will only drag the tiger down. What else can the three pigs do? Downlord Luya spoke with a serious expression. PFFF. The life goddess seemed to have been provoked, and her blood churned as she threw up another mouthful of blood. Downlord Luya was comparing her to a pig. If you had just used the light of origin to construct this cage, then perhaps I wouldn't have been able to break it. However, it's been mixed with impurities, so it's naturally a lot easier. Downlord Luya chuckled. He dares to insult us. Kill him. Let's go kill him. The heavenly sea god flared up with rage. He didn't have much left, and now, even his dignity as the only paramount heavenly god was about to be stripped away. How would he just accept this? Of course, this was only one of the reasons. There was an even more important reason, and that was that Downlord Luya's attack had already reached the critical point of the heavenly Tao's backlash. The heavenly sea god was certain that Downlord Luya couldn't retaliate, which was why he was so aggressive. Downlord Luya merely chuckled nonchalantly in the face of the heavenly sea god's wrath. He then turned to Enlin and said, I won't be able to do anything after this. It's all up to you now. You can't attack. Enlin blinked. Yes. Downlord Luya had a look of regret on his face. Enlin's eyes narrowed. I want you to poo. Downlord Luya let out a fart. The nine-colored deer cried out in fear. Its body flung the Taoist on its back on the ground. Thud! Downlord Luya fell flat on his face. Enlin exhaled heavily. I feel better now. Downlord Luya, slash. The jade hairpin suddenly tore through space as it stabbed towards Downlord Luya, moving several times faster than a thunderbolt. It was also at this moment. Enlin suddenly appeared in front of Downlord Luya before pulling out a black and hard brick from his storage ring. Boom! Divine light exploded. The jade hairpin stabbed into the brick, and its tip had already sunk into the brick, but it was unable to completely penetrate it. Enlin, the life goddess, didn't think that Enlin would take the attack for Downlord Luya even if he hated him so much. What the hell was this? At this moment, Shangguan, and Tina's attacks were already upon her. The life goddess didn't have enough power to unleash the true four elements reincarnation formation again, so she could only defend herself with difficulty. Soon, Blackstone, Mou, the three living beings, Tianyi, Flowing Gold, and Patriarch Zhuyin also unleashed their attacks. Heaven and earth tremored violently again. One devastating spell technique after another appeared, pulverizing the heavens and annihilating the earth. Regardless of whether it was Tina and the other gods of creation battling to the death, or the life goddess tenacity, everything was on full display. In the end, Enlin's side still held the absolute upper hand. Lan Xiaoni was no longer able to unleash her ultimate mystic technique, so she sat beside Enlin and spoke in a gentle voice. Don't worry, Big Boss Enlin. The life goddess is at her wit's end. We'll definitely win this battle. Enlin's brows were still furrowed. No, it's too slow. Even if she loses, she'll be able to hold on for far too long. What we need the most right now is time. Lan Xiaoni knew why Enlin was so anxious. He was worried about his friends who were in the process of crushing the heavens. Those people were facing the most powerful enemy they had ever faced. Lan Xiaoni didn't know how powerful the light goddess had become, but from Downlord Luya's description of how she was able to use tigers and pigs to separate the light goddess from the other paramount heavenly gods, she had a rough idea of how vast the gap between the two was. With this in mind, Lan Xiaoni began to worry again. Right now, it was already so difficult for them to kill 3 pigs. How are they going to win against the light goddess? Big Boss and Lin, you want to kill the paramount heavenly gods and absorb their power of Tao to make yourself more powerful, right? Lan Xiaoni asked as she recalled Lin's determination to kill the heavenly life goddess. That's right, Lin nodded. He had nothing to hide from Lan Xiaoni. After killing these 3 paramount heavenly gods, are you confident that you'll be able to defeat the heavenly light goddess? Lan Xiaoni asked. That, I'm not sure. The heavenly light goddess was too powerful, and Lin was completely unsure. Big Boss and Lin, seeing as time is of the essence, and you won't be able to recover your power in a short time. How about you? Lan Xiaoni clenched her fists and looked up at Lin with tears welling up in her eyes. You can use your ultimate Tao on me. Lin was dumbstruck. He stared at the woman before him with a dumbstruck expression. Can't you quickly recover your power by absorbing the power of Tao? You should be able to use my power as well, right? Besides, I'm a living being from the Tai Chu continent, so I can still live even if I lose my heavenly water power. Lan Xiaoni spoke with a determined expression. The woman didn't even get a chance to finish her sentence before Lin flicked her forehead with his index finger. Silly girl, what are you thinking? Lin inched closer to the pitiful mermaid, and he couldn't help but burst into laughter at the sight of Lan Xiaoni's determined expression. Big Boss hasn't even said anything, and you're already thinking about sacrificing yourself? But this is the best way. Lan Xiaoni insisted stubbornly. Even if I want to absorb the power of Tao, it's not your turn. Don't forget, there's still a turtle over there. Lin pointed toward a certain direction in the white nectar sea. The beautiful woman in the golden turtle shell shuddered in fear, and she hurriedly dove into the water. Big Boss can't see me, Big Boss can't see me. Chapter 2366. Empyrean goddess Black Mist had thought that her turtle aura concealment technique had reached the pinnacle of perfection. As long as she didn't make a sound, no one would be able to discover her existence. What she didn't expect was that Lin knew that she was watching the battle from the sidelines. It could be said that the boss's love for his subordinates was not small. Empyrean goddess Black Mist hoped that boss's love for his underlings wouldn't turn into boss's love for a power bank. She didn't want to become boss's pet. Fortunately, Lin was only using heavenly god Black Mist as an example. He didn't really have any ulterior motives toward her. Immediately after, Lin turned around to educate little brother Lan. Lan Xiaoni felt like Lin's words made sense. If he had to sacrifice someone, he should sacrifice that tortoise girl first. She held a rather high position in Boss and Lin's heart. Thinking about it, the mermaid couldn't help but smile happily. All right, I'll listen to you, Big Boss. Lan Xiaoni's eyes glowed with excitement. But the problem still hasn't been resolved. What do we do? Lan Xiaoni looked toward the eastern horizon with an extremely concerned expression. Lin did not look to the east. Instead, he looked to the north. He suddenly smiled and said, We still have a top-notch helper. He's coming now. A top-notch helper? Lan Xiaoni followed Lin's gaze toward the north. Outside the white nectar sea, an incomparably huge and majestic city. Suddenly, a strange light soared up, followed by a boundless, auspicious aura. The 5-colored auspicious chi fused together to form a gigantic totem that covered the entire Yutong divine city. Just the wingspan of the totem was 3 million feet. That totem was none other than the 5-color vermilion bird with its wings spread wide. It was the most powerful and original vermilion bird of the 4 sages of the universe. Roar! The clear and melodious cry of a sparrow resounded through the 9 heavens. Tens of millions of heaven-crushing sect members all turned to look at the majestic city with astonishment etched on their faces. Another big boss is going to appear. This vermilion bird's aura is so terrifying. Could it be There's no mistaking it. This is the divine phoenix maiden who has been missing since the beginning of the battle. As soon as he finished speaking, the five-colored vermilion bird rose from the Yutong divine city like a phoenix resting on a wudong tree. Suddenly, it spread its wings and soared into the sky. Its body shone with a blinding light that was even brighter than the sun. This was a spark of hope. This was the light of dawn in the world. The vermilion bird spread its limitless wings and soared into the sky. Above the nine heavens, there was an azure dragon coiling in the sky. All living things grew, and the verdantwood flowed. The vermilion bird and the azure dragon collided. Boom! An earth-shattering collision. Brilliant light pierced through the universe. In an instant, an infinite amount of matter and laws were born. The vermilion bird and the azure dragon collided, split the heavens. In that instant, all of the living beings on the Taichu continent and all of the living beings in the realm of stars were greeted by the sight of a vermilion bird and an azure dragon fusing together. In the sky above them, there were primeval scenes of azure dragons flying in the sky and vermilion birds flying at the sky. It was a magnificent view that had been engraved in the history of the universe. The realm of Tao was limitless. This was unprecedented in the history of splitting open the sky. Two Tao integration, sundering the heavens. In that instant, it even caused the universe to resonate. All living beings in the universe were shocked. A piece of information appeared in their minds. The divine phoenix maiden of the Taichu continent, the vermilion bird, and the azure dragon pinnacle stage of Tao integration pinnacle stage split open heaven and earth to become the only god of creation in the universe. This was a god of creation recognized by the universe's general consciousness. The entire universe was shaken by the display of the cards and the lineup. Thinking back, when Patriarch Zhuyin had returned to the god of creation realm, his phenomenon had only taken place in the opposite shore realm. Now, Su Xiaolan's god of creation realm had affected the entire universe. This was an indication of just how bad *SS Su Xiaolan was. All of the 4-9 Immortal Sect disciples were ecstatic. Their stand-in sect leader was so bad *SS. She was the only god of creation with 2 Tao integration stage, Tao integration stage god of creation realm. She was way too bad *SS. All of the 4-9 Immortal Sect disciples and elders were extremely proud. In fact, all of the heaven-crushing sect living beings were extremely excited and cheering at the top of their lungs. Beside the Char Divine Tree, Zhu Shuza looked up at the vermilion bird and azure dragon in the sky with tears in his eyes. Yishuang, Guanyun, do you see that? Your daughter is already so dazzling now. Even Zhu Shuza, who had watched Su Xiaolan grow up, would never have thought that the adorable and warm little girl would become the divine phoenix maiden that the entire universe would look up to in just over 100 years, let alone Zhu Yishuang and Su Guanyun. This experience, this opportunity, this achievement could no longer be described as earth-shattering. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to call her the daughter of the universe. Tina, Shangwan Yi, Patriarch Zhu Yin, Flowing Gold, and all of the other god of creation stage gods also turned toward Yutong City. What could they do? This scene was just too shocking for the living beings. The impact it had on all of the god of creation realm cultivators was also unparalleled. Everyone focused on creating worlds with one essential power, but Su Xiaolan had created 2 essential powers. This was a F*King record breaker. A woman in a jade dress appeared in the air above Yutong City. The azure dragon and vermilion bird in the sky all bowed to her before transforming into pure Tao that fused into her glabella. A ball of chaotic light, with heaven and earth within it, also fused into the woman's sea of vital energy at the same time, transforming her aura into something completely different. Her hair danced in the wind, and her jade barley ink garment fluttered in the wind. The woman with her eyes tightly shut suddenly opened her gentle and bright eyes. There seemed to be an azure dragon soaring through the clouds in her left eye, and there seemed to be the clear cry of a vermilion bird in her right eye. Her aura was transcendent and ethereal, and her features were exquisitely beautiful. All of the living beings who were paying close attention to Yutong City felt as if she were right in front of them, and all of them were stunned by her exquisitely beautiful features. This type of beauty didn't lie in her intricate and flawless appearance. Of course, women also had that, but her beauty lay more in the beauty of her Tao and her cultivation base. The azure dragon's boundless vitality could nourish all things. The vermilion bird's noble and holy nature was transcendent and ethereal. The two most powerful auras of different universes appeared at the same time on the woman's body, and they blended together perfectly, striking all living beings with an indescribable sense of beauty. Even Enlin was dumbstruck by what he saw. Yutong bird shocks the nine heavens. An exquisitely beautiful azure dress. My Xiaolan, she's so beautiful. Enlin murmured to himself. Lan Xiaoni couldn't help but roll her eyes. She was already his Dao partner, but he was still so infatuated. Why was Big Boss Enlin acting like a love-struck fool in front of his Dao partner? The azure-robed woman in the extremely far distance seemed to have sensed something, and she turned toward Enlin. Their eyes seemed to have met in that instant. A dazzling smile appeared on the azure-robed woman's face. She was a regal goddess, but a rare expression of guilt and joy appeared on her face. She spoke in a soft voice, Enlin, I'm so sorry. I took so long to make my breakthrough, and you had to fight on your own for so long. I'm back now, and I'm coming to help you. Chapter 2367. Su Xiaolan's bashful and guilty demeanor was about to crumble. However, everyone's hearts trembled at the sight of her. For some reason, they found her to be extremely alluring. It was a pity that a goddess like her would only show such an expression toward one man. In this world, only heavenly disciple Enlin is worthy of a goddess like her. They're a perfect match. Demon Emperor Cu sighed with emotion. Ordinary mighty figures wouldn't even dare to dream about pursuing such a top-tier existence, let alone pursue her. Only Enlin would be able to hold himself back. At this moment, a pair of five-colored wings appeared on Su Xiaolan's back, and she flew directly toward Enlin. She even bowed toward the heavenly lord of Tao and virtue as she flew over the white nectar sea. The heavenly lord of Tao and virtue waved a hand with a smile. He didn't think that the little girl he had helped out of a whim would become a top-tier existence in the nine heavens after a series of fortuitous opportunities. He could only say that this world was truly fascinating. Fisk, so this is Enlin's Tao partner. How did he find such a powerful wife? He's quite lucky with women. Tao Lord Lu Ya's eyes widened, and he had the urge to immediately flee with his little deer. Su Xiaolan flew very quickly, faster than any god of creation. Enlin, a smile once again appeared on her stunningly beautiful face as she looked at the man standing right in front of her. Then she hugged him tightly. However, this swallow was a little too big, and Enlin was sent flying backward. Xiaolan, be gentle. Enlin could feel the scorching heat from the woman's body, and he felt as if he were about to melt. How excited was this? Su Xiaolan giggled as she lowered her body temperature. I'm too strong, so it's not easy to control. Sorry, Enlin looked at Xiaolan, who was smiling sweetly, and couldn't help but pinch her soft and supple cheeks. He smiled and said, What are you talking about? If it weren't for the fact that my strength has been hollowed out, you can hug me however you want. Really? Su Xiaolan's eyes lit up as she stared at Enlin. Really? Enlin suddenly pecked the woman's tender lips. Su Xiaolan immediately blushed. Don't be here. A lot of people are watching. Why didn't you say that when you hugged me? Enlin laughed. Su Xiaolan's face turned even redder. Tens of thousands of mythological beasts stampeded through the hearts of the heaven-crushing army, and the living beings watching the live stream as they watched Su Xiaolan and Enlin. We're here to watch you subdue the life goddess, not to eat dog food. Why are you showing off your dog food in front of the entire Tai Chu continent? Some people were extremely envious, while others felt as if they had eaten a lemon tree. She was a goddess who had stunned the entire universe just a second ago, but now she had been kissed by Enlin. Sigh, what a complicated feeling. The life goddess immediately retreated in a frenzy upon seeing Su Xiaolan. She used the ocean as her path and the sky as her wings as she fled into the distance. She was not an idiot. She knew that Su Xiaolan's combat prowess was far superior to that of a normal god of creation. She was already having a hard time fighting the divine Phoenix Maiden. So how was she supposed to fight now? Fight my ass, of course I have to escape. You're not getting away. Shangguan Yi began to freeze heaven and earth. Tina also summoned the mirror of the sky to suppress the life goddess from all directions. However, the life goddess had made up her mind to escape, so she naturally had a trump card up her sleeve. Light of the primordial era. A pure and transcendent light that was like the light of the primordial era instantly melted the frosty air and shattered the divine mirror in the sky. The life goddess was able to move again, and she fled into the distance at an even faster speed. Stop chasing me. I'm not going to fight you. Why don't you go fight the heavenly light goddess? Huh? The heavenly sea god yelled. Don't forget that you're not fighting us in the first place. You're fighting to save the heaven-crushing plan, which is on the brink of peril. Time is of the essence for all of you, and you can't afford to waste a single second, the heavenly heaven god yelled. I won't stand in your way anymore, the heavenly life goddess also said. All of the gods of creation were dumbstruck, and Lin's lips twitched uncontrollably. What the F*** CK? How could they change sides so quickly? As expected, all of the paramount heavenly gods were traitors. Brother C, your world is no longer lonely. That was indeed the case. Time was extremely precious to them now, and they definitely wouldn't waste it on the three paramount heavenly gods if they could. However, this was only a normal situation. With Lin around, the situation was instantly different. Tina, Shangguan Yi, Patriarch Zhuyin, and the other gods of creation did not retreat upon hearing this. Instead, they pursued the heavenly light goddess even more relentlessly. Have you all gone insane? The life goddess gritted her teeth. Are you just going to ignore the heavenly light goddess? The heavenly light goddess is too powerful. We can't defeat her, Shangguan replied. But Giant and Lin can, Tina said with a dainty smile. That's right. And Lin can become more powerful by killing you. And our mission is to help him kill all of you. Shangguan replied. Only then will Giant and Lin become more powerful and be able to fight the heavenly light goddess. Tina urged. The life goddess almost threw up a mouthful of blood upon hearing these two top-rate gods of creation's words. She had already obtained a massive amount of power and decided not to hurt Lin. So why did Doubtful come? Why did the divine Phoenix Maiden succeed in creating a world? Why did the current situation turn into her being chased by other strong enemies and then frantically fleeing for her life? Why was this happening? The life goddess was beginning to doubt her own life. The heavenly sea god and the heavenly heaven god were also at a loss for words. Right at this moment, 9 suns suddenly appeared to block the life goddess' path of retreat. These were none other than the 9 vermilion birds that had been standing guard for Su Xiaolan this entire time. A mere Dao integration stage mighty figure dares to stand in my way. The life goddess slapped Lin across the face in rage. Boundless power of the sky and the heavens erupted at this moment, creating a gargantuan palm several 100,000 feet in size that obliterated the 9 suns. Lin was dumbstruck. Even he had to shoot the suns one by one. This woman obliterated 9 suns with a single slap. How terrifying is that? Su Xiaolan looked at Lin before speaking in a gentle voice. Give me 5 minutes. After saying that, her body suddenly disappeared on the spot. In the next instant, a jade dress appeared above vermilion bird Nanli's flames. This was a divine technique unique to the great Empress vermilion bird, which allowed her to instantly teleport between any holy vermilion flames within a certain range. The life goddess expression shifted drastically upon seeing Su Xiaolan suddenly appear in her path of escape. However, the life-reaping jade hairpin in her hand had already shot forth. Su Xiaolan placed a slender hand on the hilt of her sword. The dragon sparrow sword was unsheathed again. Chapter 2368. All the dragon sparrows let loose cries in unison. The life goddess could see an azure dragon dancing in the sky, and it was as if Su Xiaolan had transformed into a five-colored vermilion bird over 1,000,000 feet in length. These were the two most essential and only holy beasts of the two universes, and their combined auras made even the space around them tremor involuntarily. The jade hairpin stabbed towards Su Xiaolan's glabella, but was kept at bay by a burst of azure origin chi. Divine light exploded, and the divine sword of lightning and fire had already unleashed a sword projection constructed from five-colored origin flames toward the life goddess. The life goddess' spatial defenses were instantly shattered. Not only could the five-colored origin flames incinerate space, but they could also instantly melt through the barriers between worlds. What kind of flames are these? The life goddess was given a fright, and she immediately unleashed her most powerful trump card, the Light of Origin, a ray of pure light that seemed to have appeared at the beginning of the primordial era, the beginning of chaos, brought with it the power of dimensional suppression, and blocked the terrifying sword ray. Bam! The sword projection and holy flames exploded, but they were unable to break through the wall of light. It was Su Xiaolan's turn to be astonished now. She didn't think that her vermilion bird essential power would be blocked by this strange light. One had to realize that her current power was far superior to that of the great Empress Vermilion Bird. Not only was she invincible in the realm of stars, but she was also one of the most powerful beings on the entire Tai Chu continent. Breakthrough. Su Xiaolan didn't back down. An azure dragon and vermilion bird divine seal appeared on her forehead, and her aura climbed to its very limits. At the pinnacle of the heavens, the azure dragon essential power fell from the sky before adhering to the dragon sparrow sword. The five-colored essential power of the vermilion bird fused together to form an even more terrifying fusion of essential powers. One had to realize that each essential power represented the pinnacle and essence of a certain Tao. Fusing two different essential powers would be completely impossible for other gods of creation, but Su Xiaolan had managed to do it as she was the master of both essential powers. It was as if the vermilion bird had been imbued with life force, and the azure dragon had been draped in a rainbow robe. The dreamy energy emanating from it made the heavenly life god momentarily dazed. At this time, the brand new energy in Su Xiaolan's blade erupted with unprecedented power and slowly split the primordial light apart. Although it was very difficult, the light that was once high up in the sky was split apart by the blade. This proved that the power Su Xiaolan grasped had already reached the level of the primordial light. No, how is this possible? Life's beautiful eyes widened as she watched the primordial light she had relied on be sliced apart inch by inch. In the end, the blade landed on her body and drew a long line of blood. Strange origin energy instantly flowed through her blood and spread throughout her body. Then it ignited on its own. Su Xiaolan injected her power into the tip of her sword and unleashed her boundless vital energy. Dragon Sparrow Origin Flame. The five-colored flame, with a tinge of green, ignited. The life goddess body, soul, and realm burned at the same time, and she cried out in pain. In the blink of an eye, she had been reduced to a plume of smoke by the extremely powerful flames. The Dragon Sparrow Origin Flame was a transcendent level essential flame that had evolved from a holy flame. It was a fusion of two essential powers, and its power could no longer be measured by any other flames in this world. Its very existence was unique and transcendent. A woman in a jade dress stood in mid-air with her sword in hand, and there was no one standing before her. The life goddess, who had once survived the attacks of many gods of creation, had finally been slain by this woman in a jade dress. Su Xiaolan's combat prowess had once again astonished countless living beings. She used her actions to prove herself. She was a creation god who enjoyed universal treatment. My Su Xiaolan is unbelievably powerful. And Lin was once again astonished by Su Xiaolan's combat prowess. She could even break the primordial light? Was she trying to defy the F***king natural order? Even Shangwan, Yi, and Tina were dumbstruck upon seeing this. As one of the most powerful gods of creation on the Tai Chu continent, they were naturally aware of just how insane Su Xiaolan's essential power was. This was no longer a 1 + 1 is equal to 2 enhancement. This was a 1 + 1 enhancement that was on a completely different level. Patriarch Zhu Yin didn't dare to say anything. Why were all the gods of creation on the Tai Chu continent so insane? Who would have thought that I would be able to witness the perfect fusion of 2 essential powers after living for so many years? The heavenly god of Tao and virtue stroked his beard and heaved a long sigh with an elated smile on his face. Enlin's Tao partner is way too powerful. If she decides to settle the score after this. Tao Lord Luya swallowed nervously as he contemplated whether it was time to leave. He had already done what he could, so there was no point in staying here any longer. The 9 vermilion bird tribe, lickspittle birds, were already shedding tears of excitement. This fusion of essential powers is perfect. It's raised the upper limit of our vermilion bird tribe's essential powers to a whole new level. Great Empress Vermilion Bird's magic power is boundless and invincible. Great Empress is invincible. She is the eternal light of our tribe. Victory! Victory! Just as everyone was in awe and veneration, a concerned expression appeared on Yua's face. Even though this fusion of 2 essential powers is unfathomable, it expends an extremely large amount of essential power. Su Xiaolan has only just reached the god of creation stage, so the essential power within her body may not be enough for her to use the dragon sparrow origin flame a second time. If the goddess of life still has the grand primordial light, right at this moment a green light flashed. The goddess of life's body appeared completely unscathed. However, the divine halo above her head was already riddled with cracks, and it was showing signs of shattering. Her aura was also extremely disordered and feeble. Tina, Shangwan Yi, Lu Jin, Patriarch Zhu Yin, and the other gods of creation had also arrived. Su Xiaolan waved a hand through the air, and bursts of 5-colored vermilion bird essential power formed a net of flames. God of creation technique, vermilion bird prison. An extremely fearsome essential power cage appeared before enshrouding the goddess of life within. At the same time, Shangwan Yi's extreme frost prison, Tina's divine mirror illusion prison, Patriarch Zhu Yin's 100,000 ghost prison, Tian Yi's ocean bubble prison, and many other god of creation stage cages appeared around the goddess of life. Just looking at this scene from afar was enough to strike despair into the hearts of onlookers. Su Xiaolan waved a hand through the air again, and an azure dragon stone slab suddenly appeared behind the goddess of life. The goddess of life was just about to flee when the terrifying sealing power behind her began to restrict her movements. At the same time, 5 miniature azure dragon spikes flew through the air before piercing viciously into the goddess of life's arms, legs, and chest. Bam, bam, bam. Blood splattered through the air as the azure dragon spikes pierced into the goddess of life's body, pinning her mercilessly to the azure dragon stone slab and rendering her completely immobile. Let go of me, you be *starred. Let go of me. The goddess of life struggled on the azure dragonstone slab, but she was unable to break free from the azure dragon spikes and the azure dragonstone slab, no matter how hard she struggled. Even her energy was beginning to wane. After doing all this, Su Xiaolan finally heaved a sigh of relief before turning to Enlin with a warm smile on her face. Enlin, it's your turn now. Chapter 2369. Su Xiaolan had made a powerful entrance and turned the tables with her invincible combat prowess. She was doing this so that she could deliver the final fruit of victory to Enlin. Enlin flew out of the essential power cage and looked at the dejected life goddess with complex emotions in his heart. Why? I've worked so hard, I've been so cautious, and I've received so much help. But why is it that I don't even have a chance to escape in the end? The life goddess lowered her head, and her long, Dark green hair obscured her dim eyes as a self-deprecating smile appeared on her face. And Lin didn't know how to reply to the life goddess. In all honesty, the life goddess battle had been so difficult that even he was feeling a little heartache for her. And Lin, the life goddess, raised her head, and her orange-red eyes were particularly melancholic. Her lips, which were more alluring than any flower in this world, moved slightly, as if she wanted to say something, but she suddenly let loose a torrent of abuse after a momentary pause. "You freeloading bastard! If you have the ability, then come and fight me fair and square. What kind of man are you to rely on women all day long?" The life goddess' voice reverberated through the heavens, sending chills running down everyone's spine. What kind of vendetta did she have against Enlin? Su Xiaolan, Tina, Shangguan Yi, and Lan Xiaoni all furrowed their brows. Enlin understood how the life goddess was feeling. If it weren't for the help of these extremely beautiful celestial maidens, he really wouldn't be able to defeat the life goddess. However, this didn't make Enlin feel ashamed. Instead, he was very pleased with himself. "It's my ability to make them help me. This is also a part of my power." The life goddess's orange-red eyes widened, and her breathing accelerated as she spoke with an agitated expression. "What kind of ability are you to rely on women? Why do you have to make so many women help you?" And Lin faltered slightly upon hearing this, and he straightened his hair. "Because of my goddamn charm. Life goddess. Shameless people really were invincible." The life goddess didn't want to talk anymore. Su Xiaolan couldn't help but purse her lips upon hearing this. Even though she was willing to help Enlin, she still couldn't help but feel a little conflicted at the sight of Enlin sponging off a woman like this. At that moment, the origin energy cage opened up one by one, allowing Enlin to enter. Enlin passed through the final cage with his evil-slaying sword in hand and arrived before the life goddess with a calm expression. "Life goddess, I'm here to collect your power of Tao. Vanquish the heavens and slay all evil. Final Tao." Countless black Tao power lines burst forth from the evil-slaying sword, which spread toward the life goddess like a net, transforming into Tao ropes that attempted to bind the woman before him again. The life goddess opened her eyes, and there was a glimmer between her eyebrows. Su Xiaolan's face fell as she exclaimed, "Enlin, watch out!" Suddenly, a jade hairpin flew out from the life goddess's long hair, drawing a terrifying trajectory in the air with the ultimate power of death. The light of absolute beginning surged through her body, breaking free from the suppression of Su Xiaolan's origin energy. Su Xiaolan didn't expect the life goddess to still have the power of the light of absolute beginning in her body. If she really did have the power of the light of absolute beginning, wouldn't it be better to use it for escape? It was very likely that she would be able to escape from the encirclement, so why did she have to trap herself? As it turned out, the life goddess chose to gamble. She knew that Enlin was at his weakest right now, and she also knew that Enlin wanted to absorb her power of Tao, so he would definitely approach her. Thus, the life goddess chose to counterattack. "Die!" The life goddess let out an enraged roar, and the azure dragon nails that had pierced in her body were all blasted away by the terrifying light of absolute beginning. The jade hairpin stabbed toward Enlin's head at its peak state. Its blade was the power of death, and the power of the heavens revolved around its body to repel all obstructions. Its tail was propelled by the extreme ocean, and its body was imbued with the power of the heavens to maintain absolute stability. This attack could be said to be the heavenly life goddess' final retaliation. Furthermore, it was her most powerful trump card to target Enlin. Su Xiaolan wanted to stand in front of Enlin, but she was still too slow. Or rather, the jade hairpin, which was imbued with the life goddess killing intent, was simply too fast. Enlin didn't have enough power in his body, so he could only rely on tools to secure victory. He immediately tossed the chaotic alloy brick through the air, upon which the chaotic alloy brick quickly expanded in size to become his first line of defense. Bam! A fearsome sharpness exploded forth. The extremely red tip of the jade hairpin twisted and distorted the chaotic alloy brick in a frenzy before piercing into it at a rate discernible to the naked eye. Too slow. The life goddess was still not satisfied, and she unleashed all of the light of origin within her body toward the jade hairpin. The jade hairpin became pure and translucent after fusing with the light of origin, and its power was elevated to another level, allowing it to pierce through the chaotic alloy brick with ease. It was also at this moment that Enlin pulled out a mirror. This was none other than the vermilion bird mirror, which had transcended beyond the limits of a divine tool and had even successfully transcended its tribulation. It could absorb and reflect certain types of damage, and it was one of Enlin's trump cards. Little Vermilion, this is your first time showing your face, so I'm counting on you. Enlin yelled. The crimson mirror was perfectly aimed at the direction from which the jade hairpin was flying. A crisp and confident voice sounded. No problem. Who would have thought that idiot and would also ask me for help? I've been waiting for this moment for a long time. Watch closely, I'm going to... Holy F asterisk CK. Little Vermilion Bird didn't even get a chance to finish her sentence before the mirror trembled violently. This wasn't the power of the divine Tao, nor was it the essential power of creation. This was an unknown power that was even more terrifying than the essential power of creation. Bam! The jade hairpin struck the vermilion bird mirror viciously, and the crimson energy clashed violently with the light of absolute origin from the jade hairpin. The vermilion bird mirror was a weapon that was above divine tools, so it had its own pride. It had been accumulating power for so long, and it unleashed it without any reservation. It didn't want to reflect its enemy's power. All it wanted was to survive. Furthermore, it was made of an extremely sturdy material, and it was able to keep the terrifying jade hairpin at bay. Not only did it not cower in the face of a life-or-death situation from the get-go, but it also became even more fearless. I've even transcended my heavenly tribulation, so why would I be afraid of your weird jade hairpin? Little Vermilion Bird roared with unstoppable momentum. Even Enlin was quite excited to hear this. Gotcha! A crisp crack suddenly sounded. Cracks began to appear on the surface of the Vermilion Bird mirror. Little Vermilion Bird, Enlin, idiotin', I don't have a vendetta against you, right? Why is it that I'm in this hellish mode as soon as you let me out? Little Vermilion Bird was on the verge of sobbing. Her voice fell. Bam! The jade hairpin pierced through the vermilion bird mirror mercilessly. It left a lethal trajectory in its wake as it stabbed toward Enlin's head. Chapter 2370. This time, the goddess of life was still superior in terms of both offense and defense. Her jade hairpin broke through two of Enlin's top-tier defenses in succession, and she began to unleash her most lethal attack toward Enlin. She had won, but she hadn't won either. That was because Enlin's 2 layers of defenses had bought him some time. At this moment, Su Xiaolan, who was the closest to Enlin, had already rushed to Enlin's side and pushed Enlin aside before thrusting her dragon sparrow sword through the air. The azure dragon swam along the blade of the sword, and the 5-colored vermilion bird essential power surged forth in a frenzy before fusing together again. Dragon Sparrow Origin Flame. Su Xiaolan unleashed her sword strike to its maximum potential. Niwa had once asserted that Su Xiaolan could only use the Dragon Sparrow Origin Flame once in a short period of time. But what she didn't expect was that Su Xiaolan would expend all of her energy and vitality in order to unleash the Dragon Sparrow Origin Flame again. Boom! The Dragon Sparrow sword, which was imbued with the Dragon Sparrow Origin Flame, clashed with the Jade Hairpin, which was imbued with the Grand Primordial Light. 2 peerless powers tore at each other, sending Enlin flying through the air as he spat out mouthfuls of blood. Enlin endured his injuries and pounced toward the Goddess of Life without any regard for his own safety. The Goddess of Life was completely focused on controlling the Jade Hairpin, and this was the moment when her defenses were at their weakest. Enlin would be an idiot if he didn't seize this opportunity. Enlin didn't have any energy left to fight, but he still had a trump card up his sleeve. This was a weapon that no one had ever known about, and it was just waiting for this moment to reveal itself. He closed in on the Goddess of Life, and her heart trembled as she tried to end her battle with Su Xiaolan as quickly as possible. The Jade Hairpin's attacks became even more ferocious. Lin was also very quick. He pulled out a Y-shaped slingshot from his storage ring, with an egg hanging from each end of the slingshot. This was Lin's other top-tier mystic tool, the dual karma tribulations. The karmic dual calamities were extremely powerful karmic weapons, and they were also the top weapons that Lin could use to kill without expending much of his own energy. Why did he pull out a slingshot from his storage ring? Don't underestimate him. Lin is very strange. We must not be hit by his attacks. But the life form is currently engaged in a battle with the Divine Phoenix Maiden and can't afford to split its attention. And Lin's power is almost completely depleted, so he most likely won't be able to break through our three true heavenly reincarnation formation. The Heavenly Sea God and the Heavenly Heaven God both wore grave expressions upon seeing Lin's oncoming attack. They wanted to defend themselves, but they had no time to spare, and they were caught in an extremely perilous situation. At this time, Lin had already drawn his slingshot, and one of the white projectiles, Egg Tribulation, shot out and hit the Life Goddess arm. It's over. Why doesn't it hurt? The Heavenly Sea God and the Heavenly Heaven God both let loose cries of surprise and confusion. The white projectile struck the Life Goddess arm, but it was only slightly impactful. This was not even comparable to the full power strike of a trashy Tao integration stage super mighty figure. To the two paramount beings, this attack was like a small child being struck by a peanut. It was a little itchy and painful, but it didn't even break through their defenses. The two paramount beings were extremely perplexed by this. Of course, they weren't going to mock Lin for this. Instead, the sense of unease in their hearts intensified, as if they had been targeted by some extremely terrifying being. At this moment, Lin drew the red projectile on the other end of the slingshot. Breakthrough. The Life Goddess let loose an enraged roar, and an earth-shattering light erupted from her jade hairpin. All of the energy within the hairpin was released in an instant, and the dragon's sparrow sword and Su Xiaolan were knocked flying for several thousand kilometers. Even the surrounding gods of creation were knocked flying by this terrifying power. In that instant, Lin also hurled his red leftover egg tribulation. You still want to hit me? The Life Goddess, who had freed up her strength, turned around angrily and gave the red pellet a backhand slap. The pellet flew out of sight with a smack. She was just about to attack Lin when an extreme sense of peril suddenly surged through her entire body, causing her to falter slightly. Lin was already smiling. It's over for you. The conditions for triggering karma dual tribulations were extremely stringent. The white projectile had to strike the enemy's body first, then strike the enemy's body with the red projectile within a minute. Only then could the karma dual tribulations be triggered to deal a lethal blow to the enemy. However, the Life Goddess slap was equivalent to being struck by the leftover egg tribulation, which was already enough to trigger the most powerful karma dual tribulations, the karma dual tribulations. The Life Goddess essence suddenly shattered in the next instant. The paramount power of karma took advantage of this to destroy the Life Goddess in a frenzy. Her body trembled uncontrollably, and she wailed with agony. What the hell is this? Lin, what did you do to me? The Life Goddess could only look on as countless crimson vein patterns appeared on her body, and her essence was quickly crumbling under the overwhelming power of death. She no longer had the power to defend herself. Not only had she expended all of her light of grand primordial light in her battle against Su Xiaolan, but even her own power had almost been depleted as well. There was nothing she could do about this. The balance was beginning to crumble. Her essence was beginning to be obliterated, along with an earth-shattering explosion. The Life Goddess exploded on the spot, revealing a red and white egg. The egg cackled with a sinister smile as it destroyed everything in its path. It was none other than the culprit behind this attack. Lin was completely dumbstruck. What a bizarre attack. I've never seen anything like this before. Even a heavenly karma god doesn't have such a powerful karma dual attack. Who can defend against such an attack? If it weren't for the fact that the conditions for triggering this attack were so stringent, and that he had the Dark Divine Tao that he could use, he really wanted to use this as his main weapon. Something seemed to shatter between heaven and earth. And Lin knew that this was the sound of the three-phase, true, heavenly reincarnation formation shattering. This spell formation had finally been completely destroyed following the life goddess defeat. 3 disheveled figures appeared from within the gradually disappearing energy egg. They were none other than the 3 mighty heavenly gods from before. They were the heavenly heaven god, the heavenly sea god, and the heavenly life god. Furthermore, their auras were extremely feeble, and their divine halos were riddled with countless cracks, as if they could shatter like glass with the slightest touch. In front of them, there were immeasurable flowers spinning around. However, the strange red light rapidly dimmed, and the bright red petals rapidly withered. In the end, under the gazes of everyone present, they withered into countless broken flowers that fell from the sky, no longer having any vitality. The life goddess looked on as everything unfolded, but she was completely powerless to do anything. Before she could react, and Lin had already appeared before her, and the evil-slaying sword in his hand stabbed viciously into the goddess of life's chest with the last of his strength. Vanquish the heavens and slay all evil. Final Tao. Chapter 2371. In the northeastern region of the Taichu continent, above a barren wasteland, a black and white spear was stirring up the great Tao of heaven and earth, causing the universe to tremble and the heavenly Tao to crumble. The 2 heavenly disciples who were going to decide the direction of the world were at a critical juncture. They had finally transcended the 8th tribulation of the heavenly Tao and completely digested the evil karma they had swallowed. However, Chun and Cyril didn't even have a chance to heave a sigh of relief before they discovered an extremely pure light quickly approaching them from a distance. It was as if it were the future of the world, the hope of the world. It was a light that all living beings yearned for, a light that made countless mighty figures instinctively want to fly toward. It was a light that encompassed all the beauty of this world. It was this light that gave Cyril and Chun an extremely strong sense of danger. This power is so terrifying. Cyril looked at the light approaching from the west, and all of the hairs on his body stood on end as his demonic power surged involuntarily. It was quite apparent just how terrifying this being was for a being at the pinnacle of God of creation to make such a comment. He gripped the black and white spear even tighter as he plunged it deeper into the heavenly Tao. Chun-Chen's expression was also quite grave. This is an extremely pure power of light, so pure that nothing can obstruct its light. I've never seen such a form of light before. Perhaps this is the light of creation that can nurture all things. At this moment, a piece of news suddenly arrived from the 4-9 Immortal sect. All of the living beings in the heaven-crushing glazed palace had received a piece of information regarding the light goddess' successful second transformation and her return to the battlefield. So that's the light of absolute beginning? This is going to be a little troublesome. Cyril became even more nervous. Chun-Chin said, "We have to speed things up. There is still one more tribulation of the heavenly Tao." At this moment, Chun-Chun had already plunged a hand into the air, upon which a dazzling cold light erupted forth. The sword intent was vast and transcendent, and a burst of heaven-crushing true intent that wanted to shatter the entire universe erupted forth from within the sword without any reservation. Heaven-crushing technique, sword of the heavenly Tao. A golden sword projection erupted from the blade of the sword, instantly slicing the entire heavens in half. Even the chaotic space outside was sliced open with an indescribable rift. The heavenly Tao began to tremble. Boundless sorrow and rage engulfed the entire Tai-Chu continent and even radiated outward toward the realm of stars and small worlds. On a beautiful aqua-blue planet, the young girl with long, white ears and a dainty and exquisite figure paced around anxiously as she looked at the crack in the void that was getting bigger and bigger. "Looks like heaven crushing has already begun. Ah!" Why didn't Lin and the others broadcast it to me at such a crucial moment? What happened? The unknown was the scariest. She had clearly chosen a side, and this duel would decide her future, but she was still in a daze. Her vision went black, and she didn't know anything. She was like a helpless girl who was being judged. This kind of feeling was really too vexing. Sigh, it's not easy being a guard. The rabbit maiden was very depressed. She was a god of creation, yet she was in such dire straits. What else could she say? Feeling depressed, she could only take out in Lin's frying pan, add gravity and space, and silently stir-fry vegetables. This frying pan had also been delivered to her by Lin. Even in the most difficult of times, and Lin still hadn't forgotten about her. This was the only consolation in the rabbit maiden's heart. And Lin, I hope you can do well. I'm betting everything I have on you. The rabbit maiden knew that Lin had improved by leaps and bounds, and he could easily beat a god of creation. However, the problem was that his enemies were also very powerful, and it was still unknown whether he would be able to win or not. She tossed the Azure Wolf King meat into her mouth as she thought to herself. An extremely delicious flavor exploded in her mouth, and her entire body shuddered as she temporarily forgot all of her worries. Gasp! It smells so good. If Lin really loses, I'm going to take his frying pan and leave this place. The rabbit maiden murmured to herself. At this moment, in the heaven-crushing Glaze Palace, Qin Qin's sword of the heavenly Tao affected the entire universe. The golden sword projection was imbued with billions of stars and worlds, as if it were an entire universe. A universe against a universe, and the heavenly Tao against the heavenly Tao. In the face of this sword strike, the heavenly Tao was finally on the path of collapse and destruction. At this moment, the peerlessly pure light in the distance suddenly accelerated explosively. Stop! The light goddess let loose an enraged roar as a terrifying divine might of light instantly proliferated for millions of kilometers, making the space around Chun Chun falter slightly. Even a god of creation would be struck by this extremely terrifying might. Chun Chen's expression remained unchanged, as if a cool breeze had brushed past his face. His clear and calm eyes looked at the rapidly approaching light in the distance. Chun Chun, the seal on my sword has already been undone, so I'm more skilled in battle than you are. Leave the next enemy to me, Cyril said. All right, I'll leave it to you. Chun Chun immediately flew towards Cyril. He wasn't a pushover. Just the divine might of light released by the light goddess alone was enough for him to know that he was no match for her. Even Cyril would most likely. However, it was definitely better for Cyril to fight than for him. At this critical juncture, sacrificing oneself wasn't a good thing. Instead, it was a good thing to know what choice was best, so one would make that choice. This had nothing to do with sacrificing oneself. It had everything to do with finding the best solution. Qin Qin gripped on his Cyril's black and white heaven-crushing spear. Cyril placed a hand on Qin Qin's shoulder with a hearty smile on his face. I'll leave the final heaven-crushing spear to you. Qin Qin nodded. Take care. Just buy us some time. Don't worry. Cyril smiled, and the demonic power that had been repressed within his body suddenly erupted, dyeing the entire sky red. The ultimate demonic power, the ultimate essence power, and the ultimate Azura power were unleashed without any reservation. His earth-shattering battle intent pulverized the divine might of light in the distance. At this moment, Chun Chun had already plunged his black and white heaven-crushing spear into the sky again. The heavenly Tao was quickly shattered by the spear, transforming into a series of fractured Tao. At this moment, the final tribulation of the heavenly Tao, 9 tribulations descended. A boundless backlash force that was terrifying to the extreme directly blasted toward Chun Chen's origin. It was as if it had fused with the power of an entire universe, and it ruthlessly tore at the youth's body. The final tribulation of the heavenly Tao, 9 tribulations, was unleashed by the heavenly Tao, and the form of the tribulation was the most powerful backlash power of the heavenly Tao. This was a supreme tribulation that gathered all of the backlash power in the universe to crush down upon Shinshun. This tribulation was also known as the Heavenly Tao Tribulation. Chapter 23:72. The Heavenly Tao was shapeless, and the Heavenly Tao was reincarnation. Reincarnation had retribution. Now, the retribution of the destruction of the Heavenly Tao had landed on Shun Shen's body, causing the youth's body to distort and distort. A trickle of blood trickled down from the corner of his mouth. Cyril stood in front of the young man with his back facing him. Chun Chun, I'll be counting on you to overcome the Heavenly Tao's 9 tribulations. He didn't say anything as the heaven-crushing sect still had a tribulation to transcend, and he was the main force facing that tribulation. Cyril's storage ring flashed, and a dark green divine sword appeared. This was none other than the renowned pinnacle divine tool, the 9 darkness divine sword. The divine sword's aura merged with the heaven-piercing demonic energy to form an extremely terrifying power. At the same time, pure light spread from the west, like the holy light of dawn, tearing apart the thick and solid, true, demonic source power that covered the sky. The collision of the 2 supreme powers split the sky into a vast ocean of energy. Ha! Cyril sensed the light that all living beings couldn't help but yearn for, and he took the initiative to fly toward the light atop his 9 Serenity's divine sword. Now, let me see just how powerful the goddess of light has become after undergoing 2 metamorphoses. The god of creation who dominated the entire Tai Chu continent wielded her divine sword and unleashed a sword projection that spanned tens of thousands of kilometers. The dark green sword intent surged through the heavens and split the earth. The sharpness of the sword projection was simply indescribable. All living beings felt as if they could see the depths of hell within the sword projection. Boom! The sword projection collided with the light. A ball of dark and bright intertwining light exploded in the air. However, the crimson true demon essential power was soon torn apart and purified by the extremely pure light. It was as if the light of dawn had broken through the mist, purifying all powers that were different from light into light. What? Cyril's expression shifted drastically. At this moment, a figure had already appeared in the sky. Her appearance was even more stunning than that of all the Celestials. She wore a black, slim-fitting dress that revealed her snow-white, slender arms and jade-white feet. Her black hair fluttered in the wind, and she was even longer than her height. The light goddess transformed into the moonlit night monarch again, but her outward appearance was even more ethereal, and her disposition had been elevated by countless levels. She was able to shatter Cyril's sword projection with the power of light around her body alone. The goddess of light suddenly extended a finger towards Cyril. A wisp of strange light flew out from his fingertip. The light of the primordial origin pierced through the void. Cyril wanted to block it, but his body erupted with extremely concentrated Genesis chi. In the blink of an eye, 108,000 pagoda millstones were formed. They rotated ceaselessly as one, forming an endless cycle of reincarnation. However, the power of that wisp of light was still far beyond Cyril's imagination. In the eyes of all living beings, the pagoda millstone was invincible in terms of defensive power, but in the face of the unstoppable penetrative power of the light, the pagoda millstone was like transparent glass, and it was instantly pierced through. Then, right before Cyril's astonished eyes, the beam of light pierced through the chest of the most powerful true demon god of the true demon tribe, creating a huge bloody hole in his body. Is this the primordial light? It really is an irresistible power. Cyril could feel his body trembling in fear. His body was clearly already at the pinnacle, but it was still completely defenseless in the face of that streak of light. The primordial light was telling him that being able to create a world was no big deal, and being able to reach the pinnacle of God of creation was also no big deal. As long as he was still in this universe, then this streak of light was an existence that he could not defy. The goddess of light made her way towards Cyril with a cold and arrogant expression. "Stop your attack immediately." Cyril clasped a hand over his bleeding chest, and the bloody hole quickly healed. He raised his head, and his crimson eyes became extremely sharp. Who would have thought that the goddess of light would also spout such useless nonsense? The goddess of light's eyes focused, and she pointed a finger towards Cyril's head again. The primordial light shot forth from her fingertip again. Red and green essential power erupted from Cyril's body, and a huge demonic claw appeared before him. The primordial light was imbued with the power of the heavens. True demon origin Tao, extreme 9 hells. The demonic claw was imbued with the power of the heavens as it slammed toward the streak of light. Even though the primordial light was extremely terrifying, it was as if it had fallen into a bottomless abyss upon contact with the demonic claw. In that instant, the energy of the 9th hell completely devoured all the light that pierced over, and not a single strand of light was able to escape. Heavenly disciple Cyril has successfully blocked them. A heaven-crushing sect mighty figure clenched his fists with excitement. The goddess of light was already their #1 enemy, and they were still feeling very uneasy when the goddess of light revealed herself. Not only was the 4-9 immortal sect's information about her, but just the aura of the goddess of light alone was far, far more powerful than last time. They really didn't see much hope in a real battle. But now, Cyril had a way to engulf the primordial light, which was almost invincible. This was extremely exciting, and it greatly boosted their morale. The heaven-crushing sect members didn't even have a chance to celebrate. Cyril's expression shifted drastically, and he slashed his 9 hells divine sword forward without any hesitation. At this time, there was a tiny light that bloomed above the great Tao of heaven and earth. It expanded endlessly and broke through the 9 nether heavens contained in the demonic palm. Then it tore the demonic claw that had formed seals into pieces. The primordial light continued onward towards Cyril's head. Cyril's sword clashed with the streak of light again. The streak of light seemed to be imbued with some extremely terrifying power as it pushed Cyril back in retreat. Slash! Cyril's eyes widened as he activated the true demon power within his body to the maximum. The divine might of his sword erupted forth with all its might, trying to destroy the primordial light. Boom! A crimson sword projection pierced through heaven and earth, engulfing all light in this world. When the sword intent dissipated, the streak of primordial light finally disintegrated into countless particles of light for the first time under Cyril's sword. It was blocked, but it was extremely strenuous. The heaven-crushing sect members could even see that countless cracks had appeared on Cyril's sword, the pinnacle divine tool, the 9 hells divine sword. Cyril's hand, which was holding the hilt of his sword, couldn't stop trembling, looking at the calm and collected light goddess. Then looking at Cyril, everyone knew who had the upper hand and who was at a disadvantage. All of the 4-9 immortal sect members, as well as all of the first-rate forces on the Tai Chu continent, who were monitoring the heaven-crushing sect's progress through satellites, were struck by a sense of despair. Cyril already represented the pinnacle of combat prowess on the Tai Chu continent. In terms of combat prowess, he was even more powerful than Nuwa and the heavenly lord of Tao and virtue. However, even he was struggling to block a single streak of the light goddess light. How was he supposed to fight this battle? Chapter 2373. At the pinnacle of the heavens, countless stars were recording everything. In the extremely far-away 4-9 immortal sect base, there was an instrument known as the Purple Star Eye, which was able to observe everything that was taking place within the heaven-crushing Glaze Palace in high definition. It could even see through the layers of energy interference and observe the fundamental nature of the battle. Bai Ling stood silently at the center of the spell altar, observing and calculating everything. She was now a messenger on the battlefield, as well as an analyst and decision-maker. She suddenly turned to Xiao Hong. The light of absolute origin is of a higher caliber than Cyril's true demon origin energy, so there's no way he can defeat it. However, Cyril is able to close the gap between him and the God of creation through his essential power, which is far beyond the imagination of normal gods of creation. It's not like he's completely powerless against the light goddess. I wonder what level the light of absolute origin of the heavenly light can reach, Bai Ling said as she turned to Xiaohong. Xiaohong shook her crimson head and looked up at the images being broadcasted in the sky as she analyzed the light goddess' every move. She knew why Bai Ling was suddenly talking to her. However, she could only shake her crimson head with a forlorn expression. Sigh, I can't. Even though I'm the only light divine Tao cultivator on the Tai Chu continent, I'm still far too weak. I can't see through the light goddess, but I might have a sliver of a chance if I go to the battlefield. A thoughtful expression appeared on Bai Ling's face upon hearing Xiaohong's words. At this moment, in the air above the heaven-crushing glazed palace, the backlash of the heavenly Tao was already bleeding from Chun Chen's orifices. Chun Chen completely released the power of his inner universe and used everything he could to resist the backlash of the heavenly Tao. However, the terror of the backlash of the heavenly Tao was unprecedented. It was much stronger than the myriad existence tribulation. The goddess of light saw that the heavenly Tao 9 tribulations had the upper hand, and Chun Chen looked like he was about to collapse. But she still had no intention of letting Chun Chen go or ignoring him. She suddenly pointed at Chun Chen with a finger. Chun Chen was suffering from the heavenly Tao tribulation, so he was the perfect target for a sneak attack. You want to sneak attack my brother? Dream on. Cyril roared with rage as he shifted at an even faster speed to stand in front of Chun Chen. At the same time, the 9 darkness divine sword in Cyril's hand was already fiercely slashing toward the absolute primordial light. Sword Tao true intent, heaven-crushing true intent, and extremely powerful true demon origin power all erupted at the same time in an attempt to destroy the absolute primordial light. The true demonic source power gushed out like it was free, to the point where the gods of creation were dumbfounded, in order to enhance the power of the divine sword. As an existence at the peak of the creation realm, he could only rely on the strength and magnitude of the true demonic source power to confront the origin light head-on. Asterisk Kacha. Asterisk along with a clear shattering sound that reverberated through the world, the 9 nether divine sword that could be said to be the sharpest and hardest in the world was blasted into 2 by the light. Cyril was also forced to take 2 steps back by the aftershock of the explosion. 2 strikes. Just 2 strikes. And the goddess of light had destroyed Cyril's sword. A hint of mockery appeared on the woman's face. Now that your weapon is gone, what are you going to do? Use your body to defend against my absolute primordial light. Cyril wiped the blood from the corners of his lips as a sinister smile appeared on his face. You've lost your weapon? Hee. I'm afraid the number of weapons I have will exceed your imagination. His voice trailed off. A series of swords with terrifying auras began to appear in the sky. Each and every sword seemed to possess a unique sword Tao, exuding powerful and piercingly cold divine light, and some of them even materialized projections of unfathomably powerful sword intent. After hearing about Bai Qianghai's victory, I feel like I'm very similar to Heavenly Disciple and Lin. Cyril stood in front of the countless swords exuding boundless divine light with a wistful expression. We both love to use swords and collect swords. He collected 1,000 immortal swords, stunning all living beings and leaving a lasting impression on the Tai Chu continent. I wonder if my 100 divine swords will also be recorded in history. That's right, there were 100 divine swords hovering behind him. This wasn't an exaggeration. This was 100 divine swords. Rumble, the will of all of the divine swords soared into the universe, as if they were arguing over who was the sharpest. One had to realize that all of the divine swords were prideful, and all of them had a feeling that they were the mightiest and most vicious in the world. It was exactly because of this feeling that they were in perfect harmony with Cyril's heaven-crushing true intent, and as a result, they were able to unleash unprecedented sword projections. Cyril was already at the pinnacle of the God of Creation stage with just one divine sword. But now, he was going to use 100 divine swords? One had to realize that all of the divine swords here were extremely rare treasures that could only be obtained by return to Void Stage Sword Immortals and even Dao Integration Stage Sword Immortals. Even though they already had in Lin's 1,000 immortal swords, they were still dumbstruck when they saw the 100 divine swords. All of the living beings on the Tai Chu continent who were paying attention to the battle taking place at the heaven-crushing Glaze Palace, ranging from Dao body stage cultivators to Gods of Creation stage cultivators, were all staring intently at the screen with wide eyes. This Cyril, what did he do? Are all of these divine swords? I don't even know how to describe Cyril's wealth anymore. Is there really that many divine swords in this world for him to collect? Impossible. I've lived for over 100,000 years, and I can't even recognize 10 of these 100 divine swords. How could there be that many divine swords for him to collect? Don't forget that heavenly disciple Cyril is the #1 tool refinement master of the true demon tribe. He might have collected the materials himself and refined these swords in secret. That's still very terrifying. He's not going to explode all 100 divine swords at once like Lin did, right? Gasp. Hurry. Get your master's heart-relieving pill. Hurry. All of the living beings couldn't help but recall the atrocious things that Lin had done. Even though those swords didn't belong to them, they had still left an indelible shadow in their hearts. How could he do something like that in front of everyone? He was inhumane. All of the living beings began to panic as they looked at Cyril. At this moment, the divine swords began to ring as sword intent surged through the heavens. Countless sword Dao auras that could slice through all things surged toward the light goddess. Just a wisp of sword Dao aura was enough to slice through mountains and seas, but there were tens of millions of wisps of sword Dao aura here. If any other god of creation were in Cyril's place, they would have been pulverized into dust by the boundless sword intent. However, they were unable to get within 100 feet of the light goddess, as they were all purified into particles of light by the strange halo of light. The heavenly light goddess looked up to discover that Cyril had already transformed into a universe-rank true demon. His body was several million feet tall, and his eyes were as red as a pair of dead stars. At the same time, they were like a pair of bottomless whirlpools. The 100 divine swords quickly thickened and expanded to become gargantuan blades over 1,000,000 feet in length. Essential power surged through their bodies, and they appeared to be even more intimidating than before. It was as if 100 gods of creation were pointing their blades at the heavenly light goddess. In the past, Enlin buried 1,000 swords and created a myriad of images in the Tao of the sword. Today, I, Cyril, shall control 100 divine swords and measure the limits of the Tao of the sword. Peerless sword might erupted from the 100 divine swords as they descended upon Cyril. They stabbed 100 swords toward the towering Cyril. Chapter 2374. Countless living beings turned their attention to Cyril at the sight of the 100 divine swords, and their hearts thumped wildly at the same time. Cyril had chosen a completely different path from Enlin's. However, this was no less stimulating to them than when Enlin had detonated 1,000 immortal swords. After all, Cyril had summoned 100 divine swords, and all of them stabbed into Cyril's body at the same time. Sword intent exploded, and his entire demonic body was drenched in blood. One was exploding the swords. The other was exploding the swords. This was way too King exciting. Even the light goddess was slightly taken aback upon seeing this. However, her expression soon became a little grim. This was because she discovered that after the divine swords pierced into Cyril's body, they actually gradually became one with Cyril's origin. All of the essence of the divine swords and all of the true intent of the way of the sword were absorbed by Cyril. An extremely terrifying aura of the Tao of the sword erupted from Cyril's body. Cyril panted heavily as an ocean of true demon origin energy surged within his body. Wisps of crimson golden sword intent revolved around his massive demonic body. Each wisp of sword intent represented the pinnacle of the Tao of the sword. And even Tao integration stage, sword immortals could only look up to and worship him. These silk-like strands of sword chi began to gather, fuse, and transform. In the end, all of the sword chi fused together, condensed, and transformed, forming a sharpest sword in the world that surpassed the pinnacle, that surpassed the limit. A crimson golden sword over 1,000,000 feet tall, exuding a sword intent that was powerful enough to crush the heavens, appeared between heaven and earth. This sword is known as the luminous demon Tao sword. It is an amalgamation of swords that I created after exhausting all of my knowledge in the Tao of the sword. I wonder if it can be considered the #1 sword on the Tai Chu continent. Cyril held the massive crimson golden sword in his hand, and his voice erupted throughout the entire world. This was only a question, but his peerless confidence and battle intent seemed to be telling everyone that his luminous demon Tao sword was the #1 sword on the Tai Chu continent. Everyone understood that the 100 divine swords that had fused with Cyril's supreme comprehension of the sword Tao did indeed have the right to be called #1. Cyril gripped his sword with both hands, and sword intent surged violently. Billions of terrifying projections of fiend gods appear behind him, and they seem to have raised their swords at the same time. Let's see if my sword can devour light. Sky shadowing sword. Hua! Cyril slashed down at the goddess of light. The billions of god fiends behind him followed suit. An immeasurable amount of sword Tao energy that reached straight to the origin poured out at this moment. The dazzling demon sword of Tao gathered the might of billions of sword Taos, covering everything in the sky and dragging the world into its unique sword Taos domain. The domain was a strange world of red earth and golden skies where countless gods and demons wielded their swords. This sword not only covered the sky, but it also wanted to change the world. The goddess of light stood high in the sky and watched as the sky transformed into a giant blade, which was so powerful that even a god of creation would feel despair as it came crashing down on her. This strike was imbued with unprecedented profoundness and sharpness, and it could easily slice through the heavenly Tao of this world, leaving no room for evasion. Even the light of origin around the goddess of light's body was sliced open by the earth-shattering sword intent, and this was before the sword had even arrived. Looks like the power of this strike can just barely reach the level of the light of origin. The goddess of light murmured. She also sprang into action. This time, she didn't just use a single finger. Instead, she made a seal with one hand before pressing it toward the giant blade in the sky. Heavenly God technique, light carving. The light of origin transformed into a painting of mountains and rivers that stretched for tens of thousands of kilometers, using the painting to block the sword and using the sword to cut the painting. Theoretically speaking, there was no doubt about the outcome of this clash. How could a painting block a sword? However, in reality, the bright demonic Tao sword, which could be said to be the #1 sword on the Tai Chu continent, let loose a screeching sound upon striking the scroll, and countless cracks instantly appeared on its flawlessly sharp blade. I can't cut it. Cyril's eyes narrowed as he sensed the massive resistance coming from the blade. His true demon origin energy burned like flames as he injected all of his power into the blade of the sword. The dazzling demon Tao sword continued to descend. He wasn't going to back down. He was only going to advance. Slash! The dazzling demon Tao sword abruptly descended, and a light carving crashed down toward the goddess of light. However, the painting was extremely resilient, and it showed no signs of being sliced in half even after being forced back. Instead, it continued to plummet toward the goddess of light. The goddess of light pressed a hand toward the sky to hold the painting in place. The two supreme powers finally clashed. Boom! The light of origin exploded. The dazzling demon Tao sword seemed to be filled with the anguished wails of billions of gods and demons as countless Tao crumbled. At the same time, the painting was also beginning to be corroded by the sword intent and demonic energy. The mountains and rivers on the painting were flattened by the sword intent, and the living beings on the painting were being slaughtered by the black demons. The painting was finally unable to hold on any longer and was sliced in half down the middle. Even though there were cracks on the dazzling Demon Dao sword, it still managed to hold on and continued to slash down toward the goddess of light with boundless killing intent. This was the first time that the goddess of light had been suppressed by Cyril's power, and her body was quickly forced to plummet toward the ground. The gargantuan blade tore through the sky and crashed down upon the earth, reducing heaven and earth to nothingness amidst turbulent flows of demonic energy. Boom! The earth exploded. Tens of millions of feet of demonic energy transformed into a mushroom cloud that rose into the air. The entire Sword Dao domain had been pulverized by her own sword strike. All of the heaven-crushing sect members were extremely excited at the sight of Cyril's sword strike. This was their number one heavenly disciple. This was the most powerful man in their heaven-crushing sect. Is this the power of 100 divine swords? What a terrifying Sword Dao aura. It's unfathomably deep and unfathomably deep. Just what level has heavenly disciple Cyril's Sword Dao reached? Thank God the goddess of light is finally going to be defeated. Many living beings were discussing spiritedly with anticipation on their faces. The fact that Cyril was able to break through the goddess of light's divine technique proved that he really did have the power to battle the goddess of light. Some living beings were even wondering if the heavenly goddess of light would be killed by that sword strike. If that were the case, then it would be perfect. Unfortunately, things didn't go according to their wishes. Light tore through the destructive demonic energy, and the lithe and graceful figure of a woman in a black dress once again appeared before everyone's eyes. There weren't even any visible wounds on her body. Only her hair was a little disheveled. Cyril looked at the woman's right hand to discover that there was an inky black sword gash on her palm. The sword gash was imbued with lethal demonic energy, and he was trying to completely destroy the woman's existence through her wound. The goddess of light had used that exact right hand to block his earth-shattering sword strike. It appeared that she had indeed been injured. However, that sword gash was quickly purified and repaired by the pure light of origin. What a despairing light of origin. He had clearly unleashed an attack with his full power, yet the light of origin had effortlessly erased his attack. Anyone would feel despair if they were in his shoes. Cyril heaved a faint sigh as he gripped the dazzling Demon Dao sword with even more determination.